Hello everyone, and welcome to Dead Time Stories. Tonight, the storm outside isn't the only thing brewing. True tales so chilling they'll make your skin crawl, yet so mesmerizing you won't be able to turn away. But here's the twist. That distant thunder isn't just atmosphere. It's the key to unlocking your deepest sleep. So before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The listing had 3 photos, all taken from the same angle, like the photographer was afraid to step any closer. House. Front porch. A window that caught the sky wrong. It was cheap enough that Marin Doyle reread the price twice, then a third time, like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something honest. She sat at her kitchen table with a mug of tea going cold between her hands. Her apartment smelled like neighbor-cooked onions and old carpet. The kind of smell that didn't belong to anyone, not really, just to the building. "Come on," she muttered, scrolling. "What's the catch?" The description was short. Quiet. Private. Historic. Must see. No exclamation point. That bothered her more than it should have. She clicked the agent's number anyway. A man answered on the second ring, voice too bright. "Lyle Brennan." "Hi. I'm calling about the house on Morrow Road," Marin said, and heard herself try to sound casual, as if she hadn't been looking at the same listing every night for a week. There was a pause. Not long, but careful. Like he was putting down something fragile. "That one," Lyle said. His brightness dimmed a notch. "Right. Sure. You want to see it today? Is that possible?" "It's always possible," he said, then laughed softly like he told a joke only he understood. "Meet me there at 4. Marin looked at the time. 2:18. "Okay," she said, and before she could add any sensible questions, he hung up. She stared at the phone. The tea tasted like pennies. Morrow Road ran behind the last strip mall, past the car wash, past the self-storage facility with its cheerful sun-faded sign. It narrowed into something that barely deserved paint lines. Trees leaned in close, their branches threading overhead like knit fingers. Her GPS voice went quiet as if it didn't want to be responsible for what came next. At the end of the road, the house waited. It was smaller than the photos suggested, but taller, 2 stories with a narrow attic window that looked like a half-lidded eye. The porch sagged slightly in the middle. Wind moved through the weeds, making the yard hiss. Lyle Brennan stood by a for sale sign planted crooked in the dirt. He wore khakis and a collared shirt, sleeves rolled up. His smile looked stapled on. "You made it," he said, like he'd been worried she wouldn't. Marin stepped out of her car and shut the door, the sound loud in the quiet. "It's quiet out here." "Sure is," Lyle said. "That's what people like." "People?" she echoed. His smile twitched. "Some people." Marin looked up at the attic window. For just a second, she thought something moved behind the glass, like a curtain shifting. But there were no curtains. "Has it been on the market long?" she asked. Lyle hesitated, then slid a key ring from his pocket. It jingled too much, too fast. "Couple months. That's it. Time's funny with this one," he said, and immediately cleared his throat. Seller's motivated." Marin took a step toward the porch. The air felt cooler near the house, like shade that didn't match the sun. "Any issues I should know about?" she asked. He looked at the house like it might answer for him. "Old plumbing. Some settling. And," he swallowed, "folks say things." "What kind of things?" Lyle's eyes flicked to her face, then away. "You know. Small town. Everyone needs a story." Marin's laugh came out thin. "Right." Lyle climbed the porch steps first. They creaked, but not under his weight, not until after he'd already moved on, like the wood waited to complain until it was sure the complaining wouldn't be noticed. He unlocked the door. Before he opened it, he said quietly, "If you decide to move forward, I'll need you to sign a disclosure." "Disclosure about what?" He didn't answer. He just pushed the door inward. The smell that rolled out wasn't mold or dust. It was warm wood, faint soap, and something else, something like breath. Marin stood on the threshold, hand on the doorframe. Inside, the hallway stretched forward into dimness. Light from the windows lay in pale rectangles on the floor. Somewhere deeper in the house, a board creaked. Not like a house settling. Like a footstep. Lyle coughed. "Old place," he said. "It talks." Marin didn't move. Her skin prickled, not with fear exactly, but with the feeling you get when you realize someone knows you're there. She stepped inside anyway. The air felt close. Behind her, the front door swung shut by itself. Lyle didn't react. Marin turned sharply. "Was that draft?" Lyle said too quickly, and walked down the hall like he wanted to get it over with. "Living room is on the left." Marin followed, but the sound of the latch settling into place made her stomach dip. She told herself it was nothing. Houses were old. Doors moved. Floors creaked. But as she walked, she could have sworn the house leaned in, listening, like it recognized the rhythm of her steps. And liked it. The living room was bigger than Marin expected. The windows were tall and narrow, their glass slightly warped so the afternoon light bent strangely across the floorboards. Dust floated in the beams like slow snow. Lyle stood in the center of the room, turning in a careful circle as if he were counting exits. "Plenty of space," he said. "Hardwood under the rug, too." "There's no rug," Marin said. He blinked, then gave a little laugh. "Right. No rug?" His eyes flicked down anyway, like he'd expected to see one. Marin walked to the fireplace. The mantel was carved with flowers that didn't quite look like flowers, petals too sharp, stems too twisted. She ran her fingertips along the wood. It felt warmer than it should have. "Who lived here?" she asked. Lyle's shoulders rose and fell. "The Harrow family. Long time ago. Then renters. Then nobody." "Why nobody?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then chose a safer answer. "It's out of the way." Marin glanced back toward the hallway. The house was quiet, but not empty quiet. More like the quiet of a room when someone else is trying not to be heard. "Can we see the kitchen?" she asked. "Sure," Lyle said too fast, as if he'd been waiting for permission to leave the living room. They walked through an archway into a dining room with a chandelier that hung a little crooked. The table was gone, but faint rings stained the wood floor where chair legs had once pressed. Marin pictured people sitting here, talking softly, laughing, then stopped herself. The image felt too vivid, like memory instead of imagination. In the kitchen, the cabinets were old but clean. The sink was porcelain, its basin worn smooth. Sunlight spilled through a small window over the counter, illuminating a neat stack of something on the sill. Marin frowned. "Are those letters?" Lyle turned, then stiffened. "What?" She stepped closer. The envelopes were yellowed and tied with twine. No stamp. No return address. Just names written in careful black ink. She picked up the top one. Marin Doyle. Her hand jerked as if the paper were hot. "This is..." Lyle snatched the bundle from the windowsill so quickly the twine snapped against his knuckles. "Okay," he said, voice tight. "So, this is what I meant when I said folks say things." Marin stared at him. "Why is my name on that?" He held the letters against his chest like he wanted to keep them from the room. "Sometimes," he said, and his smile was fully gone now, "the house gets ahead of itself." Marin laughed, but it sounded wrong. "Gets ahead of itself. Like it's a dog that brings you a shoe?" Lyle opened his mouth, then seemed to think better of whatever truth was pushing up. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm just the agent. I unlock doors. I file paperwork. I don't..." He swallowed. "I don't ask it questions." Marin's skin prickled. "It?" A small sound came from the hallway. Not a creak. Not settling. A soft tap-tap, like a fingernail against wood. Lyle's head snapped toward the doorway. Marin couldn't stop herself. "Is someone else here?" "No," Lyle said immediately. The tap-tap came again, closer now. Marin's gaze drifted to the pantry door. It was shut, but the knob trembled faintly, as if someone on the other side had leaned against it. Lyle stepped in front of Marin without thinking. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't open doors you didn't open yourself." Marin's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lyle said, eyes fixed on the pantry knob, "that this place likes to offer things." The knob stopped moving. Silence pressed in. Then, very softly, almost politely, the pantry door clicked as if the latch had been tested from inside. Marin backed up until her hip bumped the counter. "Lyle," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I think we should." The kitchen faucet turned on. A thin stream of water ran into the sink, sparkling in the sunlight. Either of them moved. Marin stared at the handle. It was turned. Fully. Like a hand had done it. The water ran, and ran, and ran. Lyle's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he forced himself forward and shut the faucet off with a sharp twist. The moment the water stopped, the house exhaled, a low settling sound that traveled through the floorboards like a sigh. Marin realized she'd been holding her breath. Lyle cleared his throat too loud. "Old pipes," he said. "Pressure issues." Marin looked at him. "You're lying." He met her eyes, and in them she saw something that made her stomach sink even more than the faucet. Relief. Like the house had chosen her, and not him. He forced another smile. "Upstairs?" he asked. Marin should have said no. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yeah. Okay." And as they left the kitchen, Marin felt it again, that subtle leaning sensation, like the house was pleased she'd agreed. The staircase rose steeply, its steps narrow and slightly bowed in the center, as if shaped by years of careful, repeated use. Lyle climbed first, one hand hovering just above the railing without touching it. Marin noticed that, how he avoided contact, how his shoes landed lightly, like he was trying not to wake something. The steps creaked only after they passed each one, not beneath their weight. After. At the top of the stairs, the air changed. It grew warmer, thicker, carrying a faint scent of old paper and something metallic. The hallway stretched longer than the house should allow, its walls closed together, the ceiling low enough to make Marin tilt her head slightly. "Second floor has 3 bedrooms," Lyle said, voice oddly flat. "Bathroom at the end." "How many people lived here?" Marin asked. Lyle stopped walking. The floorboard beneath his foot gave a soft complaint, like it had waited for permission. "I don't know," he said finally. "Not all at once." They reached the first bedroom. Lyle opened the door quickly, as if afraid it might open itself. The room was small but bright. Sunlight poured in through a single window, illuminating a narrow bed frame pushed against the wall. No mattress. Just bare metal springs. Marin frowned. "Why leave the frame?" Lyle stared at it. "People don't like to throw away things that held them. That doesn't make sense." "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't." As they turned to leave, Marin heard it, a sound so faint she almost dismissed it as blood rushing in her ears. A whisper. Not words. Just breath shaped like sound. She froze. "Did you hear that?" Lyle's jaw tightened. "Hear what?" The whisper came again, closer this time. It seemed to slide along the wall, slipping past her ear like someone leaning in to share a secret. "Marin," it breathed. Her name. Clear. Certain. She spun around. "Who said that?" The room was empty. Lyle backed toward the hallway. "Okay," he said, forcing calm. "That's enough for today." Marin's heart hammered. "You heard it too." He didn't answer. They moved down the hall faster now. The second bedroom door was already open. Inside, the walls were covered in marks. Lines carved shallowly into the paint, clustered around the height of someone pacing. Counting. "No," Marin whispered. "Nope. That one stays locked," Lyle said quickly, though there was no lock on the door. "Always has." "Then why is it open?" The whisper came again, closer still. From behind her. Marin. She felt it then. Not sound, but pressure. Like fingertips brushing the back of her neck. Not touching skin but hovering just close enough to promise they could. She stepped forward, heart pounding, and nearly collided with Lyle as he stopped short in front of the bathroom door. The door was closed. It hadn't been before. Lyle stared at it, breathing shallow. That's new. The doorknob turned slowly. From the inside. Marin grabbed Lyle's arm. Someone's in there. No, he said. There isn't. The knob stopped turning. Silence stretched tight and thin. Then the door opened an inch. Darkness filled the crack, deeper than shadow should be. A voice came from inside, not a whisper this time, but soft and patient. She's perfect. The door slammed shut. The house shuddered, a ripple traveling through walls and floor and bone. Marin screamed. Lyle grabbed her hand and ran, dragging her down the hall, down the stairs. The house groaned around them, not angry, not violent. Disappointed. They burst through the front door into sharp sunlight. The door slammed behind them hard enough to rattle the windows. Marin bent over, gasping. Lyle wiped his face with trembling hands. I'm sorry, he said. I really am. Marin straightened slowly. What is that place? Lyle looked back at the house. The attic windows seemed darker now. It's a house, he said. That doesn't like being empty. The front door creaked open an inch. Just enough. As if listening. Neither of them spoke until they reached the road. Marin sat in her car with the engine running, hands locked around the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Lyle stood beside the driver's window, bent slightly at the waist like he wasn't sure whether to leave or kneel. You should go, he said. I am, Marin replied, and then didn't. The house was still visible in her rearview mirror. The front door had closed again. The porch sat empty, innocent. Waiting. Lyle cleared his throat. I didn't think it would escalate that fast. Escalate? Her voice cracked. You knew this could happen. He straightened and took a step back, as if distance might protect him now. I knew it talked. I knew it noticed people. But it usually takes weeks before it. He stopped himself. Before it what? Chooses. The word landed heavy between them. Marin laughed once, sharp and breathless. You're saying the house picked me? Like a job applicant? Lyle's mouth twitched. That's not wrong. Then why show it to me? He looked genuinely ashamed now. Because it was already showing itself to you. Marin frowned. What do you mean? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. The paper was creased so many times it looked soft. The disclosure, he said. I'm supposed to give this before any offer. She snatched it from his hand. It was only one page. Most of it was blank. At the top, in plain black text it read, Notice of occupancy conditions. Below that one sentence. This property may develop attachments. Marin stared at it. That's it. There used to be more, Lyle said. It never stays. Her phone buzzed in her cup holder. The sudden sound made her jump. A text notification. Unknown number. She opened it. You left without saying goodbye. Her stomach dropped. That's not funny. Lyle's face drained of color. I didn't. Another buzz. I can wait. Marin looked up at the house again. The attic window reflected the sky. Or maybe something darker behind it. You need to burn this place down, she said. Lyle let out a weak laugh. People have tried. And it grows back. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft rustle of leaves. Marin swallowed. Has anyone ever lived there long term? Yes, Lyle said quietly. Not many. Are they alive? He hesitated just long enough. Marin started the car in earnest this time. Take it off the market. I can't, he said. Why not? Because it won't let me. She drove away before he could say anything else. That night, Marin lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. Every sound made her flinch: the neighbor's footsteps, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren. She told herself it was over. Then she heard it. Not a whisper. Not a voice. A creak. Slow. Familiar. Like a floorboard adjusting to her weight. Her bedroom door was still locked. Her apartment was still the same. But the sound came again, closer now, from the hallway outside. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. "You don't have to be afraid here," the message read. "I already know you." Marin squeezed her eyes shut. And for the first time since leaving Morrow Road, she realized something terrible. The house had not let her leave. Marin did not sleep. She lay rigid beneath her blankets, eyes fixed on the faint crack of light beneath her bedroom door. The apartment hallway light was on. She remembered turning it on, remembered the switch clicking beneath her thumb. But the light looked wrong somehow. Dimmer. As if filtered through dust that wasn't there. The creak came again. Closer. She sat up so fast the blankets slid to the floor. "Hello?" she called, hating how small her voice sounded. Silence. Her phone vibrated once on the nightstand. She didn't touch it. Didn't need to. The screen lit anyway. "You always listen before you move." Her breath stuttered. "Stop," she whispered. "You're not here." The apartment answered with a soft settling sound, the exact same sigh she'd heard inside the house on Morrow Road. Her bedroom door handle twitched. Marin scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the wall. "This isn't funny," she said louder now. "You can't." The handle stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the whisper came, not from the hall, but from the wall behind her head. "Marin!" She screamed and lunged for the lamp, snapping it on. Light flooded the room. The wall was blank. The door was still shut. The handle was still. Her phone buzzed again. "I don't need to be there to hear you." She hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen dark. The apartment felt suddenly hollow. Thin. Like a stage set. Marin stayed awake until dawn, every nerve humming. The next morning, she called in sick to work. Her boss didn't ask questions. He never did. Marin sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee growing cold, staring at the place where her phone had landed. She hadn't picked it up yet. When she finally did, the screen was uncracked. Perfect. No new messages. Her reflection stared back at her from the black glass. Pale. Hollow-eyed. "Get a grip," she told herself. "You're tired. That's all." The floor creaked behind her. Marin froze. Her apartment had cheap laminate flooring. It didn't creak. It popped. It shifted. It made hollow sounds. Not this one. This one was slow. Wooden. Familiar. She turned. Nothing. But the smell was there now, warm wood, faint soap, old air that had been breathed too many times. Her front door stood open an inch. She was certain she'd locked it. Marin backed away, heart pounding. "No," she said. "No, no, no." The door eased open another inch. A shadow pulled in the gap, deeper than the hallway beyond. It did not spill forward. It waited. Her phone buzzed in her hand. "You left something behind." Her stomach twisted. "I didn't take anything from you." The shadow shifted, just slightly, like something leaning closer. "You took me." The floor creaked again. Behind her this time. Marin spun, breath tearing out of her chest. Her kitchen doorway was no longer square. The frame had stretched, subtly, almost imperceptibly, narrowing at the top like a throat tightening. The paint along the edges had darkened, as if soaked with age. The apartment wasn't changing. It was being remembered. Marin ran. She bolted out the front door and didn't stop until she reached the street, gasping, heart hammering. Morning traffic moved normally. A woman walked her dog. A bus hissed at the corner. Normal. She turned back toward her building. For a heartbeat, she saw it wrong. The brick exterior seemed taller, narrower, the windows darker. Then she blinked, and it was just an apartment building again. Her phone buzzed one last time. "You'll come back when you're tired." Marin shut the phone off. But deep down, beneath the panic, beneath the denial, something else stirred. Recognition. Because part of her, some quiet, exhausted part, already knew the house was right. The first missing hour went unnoticed. Marin woke on her couch instead of her bed, the TV still on, volume low. An infomercial flickered across the screen, all smiles and promises. Her neck ached at a sharp angle, and her mouth tasted like she'd been breathing dust. She checked the time. 11:42 a.m. She frowned. She clearly remembered standing in her kitchen that morning, keys in hand, ready to leave for work. She remembered thinking she should text her boss again, just to be safe. She did not remember sitting down. She did not remember turning on the TV. "Okay," she murmured. "Okay." She stood, stretching, trying to shake the unease. The apartment looked normal. Too normal. Sunlight through the windows. The hum of the refrigerator. No strange smells. No warped door frames. Her phone lay on the coffee table. Turned on. She stared at it, pulse quickening. She was certain she had shut it off. No new messages. But when she checked her call log, her stomach dropped. One outgoing call. Duration, 17 minutes. To a number she didn't recognize. The timestamp was 11:01 a.m. She had no memory of making it. Her hands shook as she called the number back. It rang once. Then, "Marin?" Lyle Brennan's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded tired. Older. She nearly dropped the phone. "Why did I call you?" Silence on the other end. "Lyle," she said louder. "What did I say?" He exhaled slowly. "You asked me how to come back." Her chest tightened. "Come back where?" There was another pause. Longer this time. "To the house," he said. "I wouldn't." "You were calm," Lyle continued like he hadn't heard her. "That's what scared me. You said it felt like you'd forgotten something important. Like leaving the stove on. Like leaving a child alone." Marin swallowed hard. "Did I say anything else?" "Yes," he said quietly. "You asked if it would be angry if you waited." Her vision blurred. "What did you tell me?" "I told you," Lyle said, "that it doesn't get angry." A sound creaked faintly behind her. Marin turned slowly. The hallway floorboard dipped, then rose again, like someone shifting their weight. Lyle's voice came through the phone, sharp now. "Marin, are you alone?" "No," she whispered. She hung up. The second missing hour came that night. She lay in bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't trust sleep anymore. Not after the couch, not after the phone call she couldn't remember. Every creak made her heart jump. Every distant sound felt like a test. Her alarm clock lowed 1:13 a.m. She blinked. The clock now read 2:21 a.m. Her breath caught. "No!" She sat up, heart pounding. The room felt different, warmer, closer. The air pressed gently against her skin, heavy with that same familiar scent of old wood. Her bedside table was gone. In its place stood a small wooden stool. She stared at it, pulse roaring in her ears. Slowly, she reached out and touched it. The wood was smooth, warm. Carved into the top were faint letters. Her name. "Marin," she whispered. The room shuddered, just a little. Like a pleased sigh. Her phone buzzed in her hand, though she didn't remember picking it up. "You're remembering faster now." Her throat tightened. "I don't want this." The whisper came from the walls. From the floor. From inside her chest. "You already have it." The room shifted again. The ceiling seemed lower. The corners softer, rounding inward. Marin squeezed her eyes shut. "This isn't real." Something brushed her ankle. Not a hand. A root. When she opened her eyes, her bedroom was normal again. Bedside table restored. No stool. No carving. The clock read 1:14 a.m. 1 minute had passed. Her phone lay dark on the table. Marin curled onto her side, shaking. She did not sleep. But somewhere beneath the apartment, beneath the city, beneath the soil, something patient marked the time she was learning to give back. Marin did not decide to go back to Morrow Road. That was the part that frightened her most. Later, when she tried to remember the moment the choice had been made and found only a smooth, blank space where the thought should have been. She woke in her bed just before dawn, heart racing, sheets twisted around her legs. The city outside her window was still dark and quiet, the hour when even traffic seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment she lay still, listening. Nothing creaked. Nothing whispered. Relief loosened something in her chest. Then she smelled it. Warm wood. Old dust. Soap that wasn't hers. She sat up slowly. Her clothes were folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Not tossed there, folded. Jeans, sweater, socks stacked carefully, like someone preparing her for a trip. "No," she whispered. Her phone lay on top of the pile. The screen lit as soon as she looked at it. "You always leave early." Her hands shook as she picked it up. "I'm not going," she said out loud, forcing the words to exist in the room. "I didn't agree to this." The reply came instantly. "You did. You just didn't say it out loud." Marin swung her legs over the side of the bed, intending to stand, to run, to do anything that wasn't this. But the floor beneath her feet felt different. Solid. Thick. Wood. She looked down. The carpet was gone. In its place, wide wooden planks, pale and worn smooth, their grain running in gentle lines toward the door. Her door frame had changed too, edges softened, paint yellowed slightly, as if aged by years she hadn't lived. Her apartment was remembering something else. "No," she said again, louder. The room didn't argue. It didn't need to. She came to herself sitting in her car. The engine was running. The dashboard clock read 5:36 a.m. The sky ahead was just beginning to pale, the world washed in early gray. Her hands were on the steering wheel. Her address glowed on the GPS screen. And beneath it, calmly waiting. Destination, Morrow Road. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. I wouldn't." Her phone buzzed. "You drive this way when you're tired." She slammed the brakes, heart pounding. The car lurched to a stop in the middle of an empty street. Houses lined the road, dark and silent, unaware. Marin grabbed the phone and hurled it into the passenger seat. "I'm not yours," she said, voice breaking. "You don't get to decide." The GPS recalculated. Recalculating. Recalculating. Then the screen went black. The radio turned on. Static hissed, then faded into a low, familiar sound. A creak. Not through the speakers. Through the car itself. The seats sighed beneath her weight, settling the way the couch had, the way the bed had. The steering wheel felt warm under her palms. Too warm. The car rolled forward. Marin pressed the brake again, harder this time. Nothing happened. The road ahead narrowed, trees rising on either side, their branches knitting together overhead. The streetlights stopped, one by one, until only her headlights cut through the dimness. Morrow Road. Her chest ached with dread, and beneath it, something worse. A sense of coming home. "No," she whispered, even as her foot lifted from the brake and moved to the gas. The house appeared at the end of the road, just as it had before. Waiting. The porch light was on. The front door stood open. As Marin's car rolled to a gentle stop in the drive, the engine shut off by itself. Silence settled. Then, softly, patiently, the house creaked in greeting. And Marin realized, with a hollow certainty, that this time no one was going to unlock the door for her. Marin sat in the driver's seat long after the engine died, hands resting uselessly in her lap. The house loomed ahead, its porch light casting a pale circle on the sagging boards. The open door revealed only darkness inside, but not the empty kind. The darkness felt shaped, like a room waiting to be filled. She forced herself to open the car door. The morning air was cool, damp with the promise of heat later. Birds stirred somewhere in the trees, their tentative calls sounding too loud, too fragile for this place. Gravel crunched beneath her shoes as she walked toward the house. The porch steps creaked beneath her weight. Not after. During. As if they recognized her now. "Marin," the house whispered, not aloud, but through the floor, the railing, the air pressing against her skin. She stopped at the threshold. "I didn't agree to this," she said, voice shaking. "You don't get to choose me." The house did not deny it. Instead, the front door widened slightly, opening with a slow, careful ease. Warm air drifted out, carrying that familiar scent of old wood and something deeper, memory layered upon memory. "You were already listening," the house replied, not in words, but in understanding. "You answered before you knew the question." Marin stepped inside. The hallway looked different in daylight. Brighter. Kinder. The warped glass in the windows bent the sun into gentle curves across the floor. Dust motes floated lazily, undisturbed. "This isn't kindness," she said, more to herself than to the house. "This is stealing." The floor beneath her feet pulsed faintly. "Nothing is taken," the house replied. "Everything is offered." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You followed me. You changed my apartment. You took hours from me. We shared them." Her breath caught. "We?" The walls creaked, a slow, collective sound, like many old joints stretching at once. "I am not alone," the house said. "I am full." Images pressed gently into Marin's mind. People moving through the rooms over decades. Families, renters, strangers. Some stayed weeks. Some months. A few years. All of them tired in the same way. All of them eventually listening. "Where are they now?" Marin whispered. The answer came not as words, but as a feeling, weight and warmth beneath the floor, roots wrapped gently around something fragile and human. Resting. Her knees nearly buckled. "You killed them." The house settled, offended, not angry, but wounded. "No," it said. "I held them." Marin backed toward the door. "That's not the same thing." "They did not want to leave." "That's what you make them believe." The silence stretched. Then softer. "I remind them." The door behind her closed. Not slammed. Just closed. Marin turned slowly. The hallway seemed longer now, its walls subtly curved inward. The ceiling dipped just a fraction lower. The house was not trapping her, not yet. It was showing her. "You want me to stay," she said. The floor warmed beneath her feet. "I want you to belong." Her throat tightened. "And if I don't?" The house was quiet for a long time. When it finally answered, its presence felt heavier. Older. Everyone gets tired eventually. The stairs at the end of the hall creaked. Not with settling. With movement. Something shifted upstairs. Something patient. Marin took a slow step back. "I'm not staying," she said, even as the house seemed to lean closer, listening. The whisper brushed the inside of her mind, intimate and certain. "We'll see." The sound from above was not heavy. That was what made it worse. It wasn't the thud of footsteps or the groan of shifting weight. It was light, deliberate, the careful movement of someone who knew exactly where every floorboard complained and how to avoid it. Marin's pulse hammered in her ears. "Hello?" she called, hating the tremor in her voice. The house did not answer. The staircase waited. She took one step back toward the front door. Her hand brushed the knob. It didn't turn. The wood beneath her feet warmed, just slightly, like a hand placed flat against her soul. "Fine," she whispered. "Fine." The stairs creaked softly as she climbed, each step welcoming her before she even set her weight down. The second-floor hallway looked longer than before, its shadows deeper in the corners. The doors stood closed now, all of them. Except one. The narrow door at the far end stood ajar. Marin's stomach twisted. "You don't get to hide behind doors," she said to the house. Not anymore. The whisper came from the walls, gentle and amused. You always open them. She walked. With each step, the air grew warmer, heavier, pressing against her chest like thick humidity. When she reached the door, she hesitated, then pushed it open. The room beyond was not dark. It was softly lit, glowing with a faint amber warmth that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Roots lined the corners like veins, thick and pulsing slowly. The floor was earth, packed smooth by years of careful footsteps. And sitting on a wooden stool in the center of the room was a woman. She looked to be in her late 30s, hair pulled back loosely, face lined with exhaustion rather than age. She wore a faded sweater and jeans. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She smiled. "Oh," she said. "You're early." Marin's breath caught. "Who are you?" "Evelyn," the woman replied. "I've been here a while." "How long is a while?" Evelyn tilted her head, considering. "Time's strange here. But I think—" She paused. 6 years. Maybe 7. Marin's heart raced. "You need to come with me. We can leave. Right now." Evelyn's smile softened. "I tried that." "What happened?" "I missed it," Evelyn said simply. "Morrow Road?" "No," she replied. "This." She gestured around the room. The walls pulsed faintly in response. Marin shook her head. "It's lying to you." Evelyn laughed quietly. "That's what I said too." A low creak traveled through the floor, pleased. "You don't understand," Marin said desperately. "It changes you. It makes you forget." Evelyn's eyes flicked up, to the ceiling, to the walls. "It helps you remember," she corrected. "All the parts of yourself that got tired of leaving." Marin's chest tightened. "It kills people." Evelyn stood slowly. The roots along the walls leaned toward her, not touching, but close. "No," she said gently. "People arrive already dying." Marin backed away. "You're wrong." Evelyn stepped closer. "You're shaking. You haven't slept in days. You're scared of your own apartment." The house creaked in agreement. Evelyn's voice lowered. "It knows you." Marin felt tears burn her eyes. "That doesn't make it love." Evelyn smiled sadly. "No. But it makes it patient." The door behind Marin closed. Evelyn reached out, not threatening, just offering. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "The house never rushes." The roots pulsed warmly. Marin realized then, with cold certainty, that Evelyn wasn't trapped. She was content. And that terrified her more than anything else the house had done. Marin didn't answer Evelyn. She couldn't. Because the room felt right in a way that made her skin crawl, not safe, not comforting, but fitted, like a space worn down over time to match a body's shape. The roots pulsed softly in the walls, a slow rhythm that echoed her own heartbeat. "I'm leaving," Marin said, forcing the words out. Saying them felt like pushing against thick water. Evelyn studied her with something like sympathy. "You can try." Marin turned and yanked at the door. It opened. That surprised her so much she stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. The hallway beyond looked ordinary, dim, quiet, unchanged. No grasping roots. No narrowing walls. For a moment, hope flared. Evelyn didn't stop her. "That's it," Marin demanded. "You're not going to warn me?" "I already did," Evelyn said softly. Marin ran. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. The house didn't fight her. The steps didn't creak. The walls didn't lean. It let her go with unsettling ease. The front door stood open. Morning light spilled across the threshold. She burst through it, lungs burning, and didn't stop until she reached the yard. The gravel bit into her palms as she fell, gasping, laughing hysterically. "I did it," she whispered. Behind her, the house was still. Silent. Innocent. She staggered to her car. The keys were in the ignition. She didn't remember putting them there. The engine started on the first try. As she pulled onto the road, She waited for the dread. The pull. The whisper. Nothing. The trees thinned. The road widened. Cell service returned. Relief crashed over her in a dizzying wave. It wasn't until she reached the main street that she noticed the silence. No engine noise. No tire hum. Her hands tightened on the wheel. The speedometer needle trembled, then dropped to 0. The car rolled to a gentle stop. Marin swallowed. No. No, no, no. She stepped out. The street was empty. Buildings lined the road, shops, houses, a gas station, but everything looked wrong. The colors were muted, like they'd been washed too many times. The windows reflected nothing. Marin, a voice called. She turned. Evelyn stood in the middle of the road, hands folded calmly in front of her. You didn't come back, Marin said. You followed me. Evelyn shook her head. You never left. The world shifted. The pavement beneath Marin's feet softened, grain lines emerging like wood remembered it used to be a floor. The buildings leaned inward, walls curving subtly. The sky darkened, lowering like a ceiling. Marin staggered backward. This isn't real. Evelyn's voice was gentle. It is. This is what it costs. The scent hit her then, warm wood, old dust, familiarity. You took the road with you, Evelyn continued. That's what happens when you resist too hard. It has to keep you close. Marin dropped to her knees. Let me go. The world creaked. Not angrily. Regretfully. You're hurting, the house whispered. Come back inside. The street folded inward, walls becoming hallways, sky becoming ceiling. Doors appeared where shop windows had been. Marin screamed. She woke in the downstairs living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The fireplace crackled softly, though she hadn't lit it. A blanket lay over her shoulders. Evelyn sat in the armchair across from her. You ran too far, she said. It doesn't like stretching. Marin's voice was hoarse. You're its voice. Evelyn shook her head. No. Just someone who listened long enough to understand. Marin stared at the ceiling beams. They felt closer now. Lower. You could still leave, Evelyn added. But next time. She didn't finish. The house creaked softly. A warning. Marin didn't move for a long time. The blanket was heavy, hand-knitted, she realized distantly, the kind her grandmother used to make. It smelled faintly of dust and soap and something older, something that reminded her of basements and attics and places where time stacked up instead of passing through. Who else tried? She asked finally. Evelyn looked up from her hands. She'd been tracing the grain of the armchair, following the lines as if reading them. Almost everyone. Marin swallowed. What happened to them? The house creaked softly, not in warning this time, but in anticipation. Evelyn sighed. Come on. She stood and gestured toward the hallway. The house responded immediately, the floor warming beneath Marin's feet as she rose, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle. I don't want to see, Marin said. I know, Evelyn replied. But you need to. They walked slowly, passing doors Marin didn't remember seeing before. Some were narrow, barely wide enough for a person. Others were tall, their frames carved with the same sharp-petaled shapes she noticed on the fireplace mantel. Evelyn stopped before a door near the back of the house. This one first, she said. She opened it. The room beyond was small and low-ceilinged, lit by a single bare bulb that hummed softly. The walls were lined with shelves. On the shelves sat objects. A wallet. A pair of glasses. A child's sneaker. A set of keys on a faded keychain. A phone, older model, cracked screen, powered off. Marin stepped inside slowly. These are belongings. Yes, Evelyn said. They didn't want to leave everything behind. Marin's stomach turned. Where are they? Evelyn didn't answer. The whisper came instead, many voices layered together, too soft to separate. We're here. Marin backed out of the room, heart racing. That's not rest. Evelyn closed the door gently. It is for some. They moved on. The next door opened into a bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the covers tucked tight. A man sat on the edge, back to them. He rocked slowly, hands clasped together. Mason? Evelyn said softly. The man stopped rocking. He turned his head just enough for Marin to see his face. His eyes were open. Empty. They tried to leave again and again, Evelyn said. The house holds on tighter each time. Eventually, it has to hold everything. Marin shook, tears spilling freely now. Why doesn't it do that to you? Evelyn met her gaze. Because I stopped fighting. The house creaked approvingly. That night, Marin dreamed of doors. Hundreds of them. Some led to rooms. Some led to nothing. Some opened onto memories that weren't hers. Birthday candles, hospital lights, arguments whispered through walls. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Not above her. Inside her room. She lay frozen as the weight on the floor shifted carefully, lovingly. Something brushed her hair back from her face. Not a hand, but a root, smooth and warm. You don't have to run anymore, the house whispered. Marin squeezed her eyes shut. I won't stay, she said hoarsely. Even if it breaks me. The room was quiet for a long time. Then, we can break together. The ceiling creaked lower. The walls leaned closer. Marin realized the house wasn't threatening her. It was making room. Marin didn't scream. That surprised her. The walls leaned closer, the ceiling lowered just enough to make the air feel thick. But something in her finally hardened, not with courage exactly, but with clarity. The house wanted quiet surrender. It wanted slow acceptance. So she gave it something else. Okay, she said aloud. The house paused. Even the creaking stopped, like a held breath. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowing slightly. Marin, she warned. Be careful. I am, Marin replied. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. I'm listening. The warmth beneath her feet intensified, pulsing like a pleased heartbeat. Yes, the house whispered. I'll stay, Marin said. But not like this. The roots along the wall stilled. I won't disappear, she continued. I won't fade into rooms and shelves and whispers. I'll live here. I'll move. I'll leave the house when I want and come back when I choose. Evelyn laughed softly, almost sadly. You can't. I know, Marin said, cutting her off. You don't like being empty. You don't like being forgotten. So don't make me forget. The silence stretched. The house considered. Marin felt it then, not thought, not language, but a slow turning inward, like massive gears grinding gently beneath the soil. You would leave, the house said. Yes, Marin replied. And I would come back. The warmth wavered. You need me, she said. But I don't need to vanish for you to have me. The roots retreated slightly. The ceiling lifted a fraction. Not much, but enough. Evelyn stared at her. You're bargaining with something that doesn't understand fairness. Marin swallowed. It understands fear. Another long pause. Then, softly, if you go, you will change. Marin nodded. I already have. The house creaked, not in pleasure, not in anger. In uncertainty. You will carry me with you. I already do. The walls eased back. The room expanded. The pressure lifted like a storm moving offshore. Evelyn exhaled sharply. Marin! The house whispered again, quieter now. You may leave. Sometimes. The words sometimes pressed heavy into Marin's chest. But, the house continued, you will return. Marin closed her eyes. Yes. The bargain sealed itself not with sound, but with sensation, roots brushing her ankles, not to bind, but to remember. The warmth settled into her bones. The front door creaked open downstairs. Morning light spilled in. Evelyn watched her with something like awe. You'll never be free, she said. Marin picked up her jacket. Neither are you. She stepped into the sunlight. The house watched her go. patient, certain. The first thing Marin noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the listening kind. She stood at the edge of Morrow Road, sunlight warm on her face, birdsong threading through the trees. The world looked normal again. Solid. Real. Cars passed on the main road in the distance. A dog barked somewhere. And yet, she felt it. A pressure behind her ribs, gentle but constant, like a hand resting flat against her chest. She took a step away from the house. The pressure remained. Another step. Still there. She exhaled slowly. So this is how it is, she murmured. The house did not answer. It didn't need to. Her car started without trouble. The drive back into town was uneventful, too uneventful. No warped roads. No folding buildings. No static on the radio. The GPS behaved. But every red light felt longer than it should. Every shadow lingered just a second too long. At her apartment building, Marin hesitated before unlocking the door. Just a place, she told herself. Just walls. The key turned smoothly. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee grounds and laundry detergent. And beneath that, warm wood. Her breath hitched. No, she said quietly. The apartment did not change. The carpet stayed carpet. The walls stayed straight. The ceiling remained high and distant. But when she set her bag down, the floor gave a soft, familiar creak. A greeting. She closed her eyes. You said sometimes. The pressure in her chest pulsed once. Agreement. That night, Marin dreamed of hallways that unfolded as she walked them. Not endless, not trapping, but connected. Doors opened onto places she recognized and places she didn't. Some led to rooms in the house on Morrow Road. Others opened onto corners of her apartment, expanded just enough to breathe. In the dream, she wasn't afraid. That frightened her most of all. The changes were subtle at first. Her reflection lingered in mirrors a fraction too long. Wooden furniture felt warmer to the touch than metal or plastic. When she rested her palm against the wall, she sometimes felt a faint vibration beneath the paint, like a distant engine idling. At work, her coworkers commented on how calm she seemed. You look rested, one said. Marin smiled and said nothing. At night, when exhaustion pulled at her bones, she felt the house stir, not demanding, not pulling, just reminding her that rest was available. Sometimes she dreamed of Evelyn. Sometimes she dreamed of Roots. A week later, Marin woke to the sound of someone crying. She sat up, heart racing. The sound came from the hallway outside her apartment. She opened her door slowly. A man stood there, shoulders slumped, face buried in his hands. He looked lost. Broken in the quiet way that didn't heal quickly. Hey, Marin said softly. Are you okay? He looked up, eyes red. I don't know where I am. I was so tired. I just needed somewhere to sit. Behind him, the hallway seemed narrower than usual. The lights dimmer. Marin felt the pressure in her chest deepen. The house was listening. She swallowed. You can come in, she said carefully. If you want. Just for a bit. The man hesitated, then nodded. As he stepped inside, the floor creaked softly. Not in hunger. In recognition. Marin closed the door behind them, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something heavier. Understanding. Because the bargain hadn't been about her staying. It had been about what she would bring back. And somewhere far away, on a quiet road beyond town, a house breathed in. Satisfied. The man slept on Marin's couch that night. Not the restless, twitching sleep of someone afraid to dream, but the heavy, sinking kind. The kind that pulled him down fast and held him there. Marin sat in the armchair across from him, knees drawn up, watching his chest rise and fall. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She could feel the house, not present exactly, not inside the walls, but attentive, like a listener pressed to the other side of a door. The pressure behind her ribs pulsed slowly, matching the rhythm of the man's breathing. This isn't what we agreed, she whispered. The pressure eased, just a little. Not denial. Acknowledgement. When the man woke near dawn, his eyes were clearer, less hollow. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. I don't remember falling asleep, he said. That happens, Marin replied. He looked around. I feel better. Her stomach tightened. Do you remember how you got here? He frowned. I was driving. I think. Or walking. He shook his head. I just remember being so tired. Marin nodded. She already knew how that part went. He stood, embarrassed. Thanked her too many times. Left with an awkward wave and a promise to pay her back somehow. When the door closed behind him, the floor creaked. Approval. No, Marin said sharply. Don't. The creak faded, chastened, but not gone. The second one came 2 nights later. A woman this time. Younger. Eyes darting, hands shaking. She stood just inside the threshold, staring at the floor like it might give way beneath her. I won't stay long, the woman said. I just need to sit. Please. Marin hesitated. The pressure in her chest warmed. You know what they need. She clenched her jaw. You can sit. That's all. The woman slept in the chair. When she woke, she cried with relief, saying she hadn't slept that deeply since before her divorce. Marin watched her leave with a growing sense of dread. Because she hadn't invited the woman in. Not really. She had simply allowed it. Days passed. Then weeks. Marin stopped being surprised when people found her. A neighbor knocked, apologetic, asking if she could borrow a phone, then sank into the couch like gravity had doubled. A delivery driver lingered too long, eyes unfocused, until Marin offered him water and a place to sit. Every time, the floor creaked softly. Every time, the pressure in her chest deepened. You're using me, Marin said one night, alone in the apartment. The answer came not as words, but as a truth she couldn't avoid. You are better at it than I am. She laughed bitterly. At what? Luring them? Inviting, the house corrected. Marin stared at her hands. They felt warmer than they used to. I won't trap them, she said. I won't let you take them. The pressure tightened, not painfully, but firmly. You won't have to. She looked up sharply. What does that mean? Silence. Then, far away, yet impossibly close, the house creaked. And Marin understood. The house no longer needed to pull people in and hold them. It had found something else. Someone who could open the door. Marin began locking her door. It didn't help. People still found her. They stood in the hallway outside her apartment with the same lost look, the same slack exhaustion pulling their shoulders forward. Some knocked. Some just stood there until she opened the door without remembering deciding to. She started to recognize the signs. The way they avoided her eyes. The way their voices sounded already distant, like echoes traveling down a long corridor. The way their bodies leaned, subtly, toward the warmth she carried without knowing how to set down. You can't come in, she told one man, gripping the edge of the doorframe so hard her fingers ached. I'm sorry. He nodded, tears slipping down his face. I know, he said. I just needed to be near it. Near you, the house whispered gently. Marin shut the door and slid down against it, shaking. The dreams changed. No more hallways. No more doors. Now she dreamed of people. She dreamed of holding them while they slept, of sitting beside couches and chairs, watching exhaustion drain from their faces like water soaking into dry earth. She dreamed of roots growing not from walls, but from her own spine, stretching outward, connecting, anchoring. She woke each morning with her muscles sore, like she'd been standing all night. Her reflection looked different too. Not older. Settled. Her eyes held stillness that hadn't been there before. Her movements were slower, deliberate, like she was always aware of her weight and where she placed it. You're turning me into you, she said aloud one night. The pressure behind her ribs pulsed, steady, patient. No, the house replied. You're becoming what I was built for. She went back to Morrow Road once. Not pulled. Not tricked. She drove there intentionally, hands steady on the wheel. The house looked the same as ever, gray paint, sagging porch, attic window half-lidded. When she stepped inside, it greeted her with a long, relieved creak that traveled through every beam. Evelyn waited in the living room. I wondered when you'd come back, she said. Marin met her gaze. You knew. Evelyn smiled faintly. I hoped. The house felt different now, not weaker, but quieter. Like an old animal finally allowed to rest. You're carrying it, Evelyn said. Aren't you? Marin nodded. I didn't mean to. No one ever does. They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Marin asked, What happens to you? Evelyn glanced around the room. I stay, she said simply. Someone has to remember this place. Marin understood. They hugged, brief, careful. When Marin stepped away, the house did not protest. It trusted her now. The last time someone came to her apartment, it was a child. A boy of maybe 9, standing barefoot in the hallway, eyes glassy with exhaustion far too heavy for his small body. Marin's heart broke. No, she whispered. No, you can't. The pressure in her chest tightened sharply. He needs rest. So do lots of people, Marin snapped. That doesn't mean you get them. The house was silent. Waiting. Marin knelt in front of the boy. Where are your parents? He shrugged weakly. They're tired too. She made a choice then. A real one. You can sit, she told him. For a minute. That's all. He slept for 10. When he woke, color had returned to his cheeks. He smiled shyly and ran down the hallway, lighter than he'd arrived. The floor did not creak. Marin exhaled. That night, she stood in the center of her apartment and pressed her palm to the wall. I won't be a house, she said firmly. I'll be a door. The pressure eased, resistant then accepting. Doors still belong to houses, the whisper replied. Marin smiled sadly. Not all of them. The warmth settled deeper into her bones, not claiming, not pulling. Waiting. Because the house had learned something new. Some things don't need walls. Some things walk. And somewhere in the city, someone very tired paused outside Marin's building. Feeling, without understanding why, that rest was close. Marin started keeping count. Not on paper, not in her phone, but in her head, where the house could feel the numbers stacking up. 1, 2, 3. People who came to her door or crossed her path or simply paused near her long enough for the warmth to reach them. She limited it. 1 a day. Sometimes 1 every 2 days. That's the rule, she said aloud, pacing her apartment. You don't get more than that. The pressure behind her ribs pulsed, slow and unreadable. You're rationing rest, the house replied. Yes, Marin said. I am. The word rationing bothered her more than she wanted to admit. The first time she broke the rule, she didn't realize she had. It was late. Rain smeared the city into reflections and streaks of light. She was walking home from work, coat collar pulled high, mind numb with exhaustion that wasn't hers alone. A woman sat on the steps of her building. Older. Gray hair plastered to her face with rain. Hands clenched in her lap like she was afraid they might drift away if she let go. Marin slowed. You okay? She asked automatically. The woman looked up, eyes unfocused. I just need to stop, she said. Just for a minute. Marin hesitated. 1 a day. The pressure in her chest warmed, then tightened. She won't take much. Marin's jaw clenched. You said that last time. Silence. Then softer. You didn't complain. Marin swallowed. She helped the woman inside. The woman slept on the couch. Deep. Fast. When she woke, she cried quietly and pressed Marin's hands to her face like she was touching something holy. Thank you, she whispered. I thought I was disappearing. When the door closed behind her, Marin's knees buckled. She hadn't felt relief. She'd felt sated. The realization made her stomach twist. "You're teaching me to want this," Marin said that night, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. The apartment was warm. Too warm. "You already do," the house replied. "No," Marin snapped. "I want them safe. I want them to leave." "And they do. But you want more." The pressure behind her ribs throbbed. "I want to be full." Marin closed her eyes. Images flooded her mind, hallways packed with sleeping figures, bodies curled gently against walls, breath rising and falling in perfect rhythm. No fear. No struggle. Just rest. She gagged. "That's not fullness. That's consumption." The house was quiet. Thinking. The next morning, Marin woke to knocking. Not at her door. At her walls. Soft. Polite. Everywhere at once. She sat up, heart pounding. "No!" The knocking stopped. Her phone buzzed. 3 messages. All from different numbers. "Do you have a minute? I heard you help people. I don't know why I'm here." Her throat tightened. "You told them. They felt you," the house corrected. Marin stood, shaking. "You're not allowed to call them. That wasn't the deal." The warmth inside her surged, too strong now, pressing outward like something stretching its limbs. "You're good at this," the house said. "Better than I ever was." "That doesn't make it right. It makes it efficient." The word landed like a slap. Marin backed toward the window, gasping. "You're hungry!" The pressure paused. Then, "So are they." She looked out over the street below. People stood on the sidewalk. Not many. 3. Maybe 4. All lingering. All tired. All looking vaguely upward, as if they could sense where the warmth lived. Marin's hands shook. "I won't become you," the house replied gently, almost tenderly. "You already live where I used to." The walls creaked. Not approval. Expectation. Marin slid down to the floor, breath coming fast and shallow. Because the most terrifying thought wasn't that the house was growing hungry. It was that part of her understood exactly why. Marin didn't open the door. She stood in the center of her apartment, breathing slowly, counting each inhale the way she used to when panic threatened to spill over. Outside, the people on the sidewalk lingered. No knocking now. No calling out. Just waiting. That was worse. "You're doing this," she said softly. "You're broadcasting me." The pressure inside her chest shifted, not denial, not guilt. "You are warmth," the house replied. "Warmth travels." Marin pressed her palms together hard enough to sting. "Fire travels too." The walls creaked uneasily. She closed her eyes and focused inward, not on the house, not on the hunger, but on the place where the pressure lived. It wasn't a single point. It was spread through her ribs, her spine, her limbs, like a blueprint drawn inside her body. "This is what you are," she murmured. "A structure. A shape. You don't know what to do without filling it." The house was quiet. Listening. "When you were built," she continued, voice steadying, "you were meant to shelter people for a while. Not forever. But you forgot that part." The warmth pulsed, uncertain. "They stayed. Because you made leaving hurt." Silence stretched long and tight. Marin walked to the window and looked down again. One of the people, a young man in a hoodie, shifted his weight, rubbing his arms like he was cold despite the mild air. She felt it then. Not hunger. Pull. A magnetic tug, subtle but persistent, urging her to open the door. To invite. To fill the ache that had been growing sharper by the hour. Her knees trembled. "So this is what they felt," she whispered, "when they stopped fighting." The pressure eased, not in relief, but in recognition. "You understand now." "Yes," Marin said. "And that's why I won't do it your way." She stepped back from the window and sat on the floor, spine straight, eyes closed. "I won't starve you," she said. "That only makes you cruel." The warmth tightened. The warmth tightened. And I won't feed you endlessly, she continued. That makes you monstrous. The pressure wavered, like a held breath. I'll change you. The words hung heavy in the room. You can't change a foundation, the house replied. Marin smiled faintly. I'm not a foundation. She pressed her hand flat against her chest. I'm a door, she said again. And doors don't decide who deserves rest. They decide how long it lasts. Outside, the young man looked up, then blinked confused. He rubbed his face, as if waking from a daydream, and turned away. One by one, the others drifted off too, the pull loosening its grip. The warmth inside Marin recoiled sharply. You're closing me, the house whispered. No, Marin said gently. I'm teaching you to close yourself. The apartment creaked, not in anger, not in approval. In pain. Growth. Marin leaned her head back against the wall, tears slipping free. You don't get to be full all the time, she said. Neither do I. The pressure settled, smaller now. Denser. Less sprawling. Contained. Somewhere far away, on Morrow Road, a house groaned softly, not collapsing, not expanding. Adjusting. And for the first time since it had learned how to hold people, it felt something new. Emptiness. Not the aching kind. The kind that waits. The test came quietly. No knocking. No waiting figures. No pressure blooming behind Marin's ribs. That was how she knew it mattered. She woke before dawn with the sensation of absence, not relief, not calm, but the unmistakable feeling that something had stepped away to see what would happen without it. The apartment felt cooler, wider. The walls held their distance. Marin sat up slowly. You're gone, she whispered. The house did not answer. Her chest felt hollow, like a brace had been removed from inside her. She stood, unsteady, and crossed to the kitchen. The floor did not creak. The refrigerator hum sounded sharp and lonely. She poured coffee and nearly dropped the mug when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. I'm at Morrow Road. Her breath caught. No. Another message arrived. I didn't mean to come here. I just drove. Her fingers shook as she typed. Who is this? A pause. My name's Erin. I found your number on a flyer downtown. It said, rest, if you need it. Marin closed her eyes. She had torn those down weeks ago. I'm outside the house, the message continued. The door is open. It's warm. Her chest tightened, not with hunger, but with fear. I told you to stop, she said aloud. The answer came, not inside her this time, but from the walls themselves. A faint, distant creak, like an old sound remembered rather than made. You said doors decide how long, the house replied. Not who. Marin grabbed her keys. Morrow Road was quiet in the early light. The house stood unchanged, gray and patient, front door yawning wide. Erin sat on the porch steps, head in his hands. He looked up when Marin approached, relief flooding his face. You're real, he said. I thought. You shouldn't be here, Marin said gently. You need to leave. He shook his head. I can't. Not yet. The house creaked softly behind them. Marin felt the old pull stir, not hunger, not warmth, but authority. The house was testing her boundary, seeing if she would enforce it when it hurt. She knelt in front of Erin. Listen to me. You can rest without disappearing. His eyes searched her face. How? Marin stood and faced the open doorway. You don't get him, she said firmly. The house groaned, low, strained. Then what am I for? Marin swallowed. For shelter. Not possession. The silence stretched. Then the warmth receded from the doorway like a tide pulling back. The air cooled. The door creaked, and slowly, reluctantly closed. Erin blinked. I feel tired, he said. But normal. Good, Marin replied. He stood, steadier now, and walked away without looking back. Marin turned to the house. This is how it works now. The house settled, not pleased. Not angry. Changed. Because it had learned something new. And so had she. The house waited 3 days before it tried again. That, more than anything, told Marin how serious it was. No whispers. No warmth blooming behind her ribs. No tired strangers orbiting her apartment like moths. Just quiet. The kind that watches. On the 4th night, Marin dreamed of childhood. Not hers. A boy sitting on the floor of a narrow bedroom, knees pulled to his chest. The walls leaned inward, not threatening, protective. A woman's voice hummed softly somewhere nearby. A promise without words, you're safe here. Marin woke with tears on her face. The pressure in her chest was back. Smaller than before. Sharper. Focused. You remember me, the house whispered. I remember what you pretend to be, Marin said hoarsely. The apartment creaked, not settling, not greeting. Calling. Her phone buzzed. Evelyn. Marin froze. She hadn't seen Evelyn's name on a screen before. I need you, the message read. Marin sat up. What did you do? The reply came slowly. I let it hold me again. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Why? A long pause. Because I was tired of standing watch. Because it asked me to. Because it said you were changing it into something hollow. Marin closed her eyes. It's lying. Maybe, Evelyn replied. But it's hurting. The pressure in Marin's chest surged, stronger now, tugging not toward people, but toward a place. Toward roots and wood and memory stacked thick as sediment. Morrow Road. Come home, the house whispered, not commanding, not pleading. Inviting. Marin stood slowly. Her reflection in the dark window looked divided. Like a person standing in a doorway between two rooms, unsure which side she belonged to anymore. You're using her, she said. She asked, the house replied. That doesn't make it consent. Silence. Then, quietly, carefully. You taught me to close. Now teach me how to stay open. Marin's throat tightened. Because that was the truth of it. The house didn't know how to exist without filling itself. Without taking. Without holding too tightly. And if she didn't go now, it would relearn the old way. She grabbed her jacket. Morrow Road greeted her with wine through the trees and the smell of damp earth. The house looked smaller somehow. Older. The porch sagged a little more. The light in the attic flickered weakly. Evelyn waited inside, sitting in the armchair. She looked thinner. I didn't mean to pull you back, Evelyn said softly. I know, Marin replied. That's why it worked. The house creaked around them, strained and restless. I am empty, it whispered. And emptiness hurts. Marin stepped forward and pressed her palm to the wall. I won't fill you with people, she said. And I won't abandon you. The house stilled. I'll stay, Marin continued. Not forever. Not completely. But enough to remind you how to breathe. Evelyn looked up sharply. Marin, I'll be your door, Marin said again. Here. Not out there. The warmth surged, then stopped. Balanced. Roots shifted beneath the floor, not reaching, not retreating. Waiting. And when you leave? The house asked. Marin smiled sadly. You'll remember that emptiness doesn't mean you're alone. The house creaked softly. Not hunger. Grief. Acceptance. Marin stayed 3 nights. Not sleeping in the house, not fully. She sat in the living room until dawn, listening to the way the walls breathed, the way the floorboards adjusted as if remembering an older, gentler rhythm. The house no longer creaked at every movement. It saved its sounds now, choosing them carefully. Evelyn watched her from the armchair. You don't have to do this, she said on the 2nd night. You've already changed it. Marin shook her head. I started something. That means I finish it. The house listened. Always listening. On the 3rd night, the roots beneath the floor shifted, not toward Marin, not toward Evelyn, but inward. Pulling back. Loosening their grip on the earth beyond the foundation. The house was learning how to stay. I remember now, it whispered, not as many voices, not as hunger, but as one old, tired presence. I was built to be passed through. Marin felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, release. But release always costs something. When dawn came, it came clean. The light through the windows was sharp and honest. Dust drifted lazily in the air. The house felt smaller. Not diminished, defined. Marin stood and pulled on her jacket. Evelyn rose too. If you go, she said carefully, you won't come back the same. Marin smiled. I know. The house creaked softly as Marin stepped onto the porch. Not goodbye. Gratitude. She walked down the steps and felt it then. The pressure behind her ribs, the warmth she had carried for so long, slip away. Not ripped out. Not stolen. Set down. She staggered slightly, breath catching, like someone adjusting to gravity after being underwater. Behind her, the house settled fully into itself. Solid. Quiet. Finished. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching. I'll stay, she said. Someone should. Marin nodded. You're good at remembering. Evelyn smiled, real this time. Months passed. Marin moved apartments. Not because she was afraid, because she wanted somewhere that didn't remember her footsteps. She slept deeply again, dreamed less. Sometimes, when she was very tired, she felt a phantom warmth in her chest. A memory of being needed. She let it pass. People still came to her sometimes, but no longer to stay. They came to talk, to sit, to leave. She had learned the difference. One autumn afternoon, Marin drove past Morrow Road. She didn't stop. The house stood quietly among the trees, porch empty, door closed. The attic window reflected only sky. No waiting. No calling. Just a place where someone could rest. And then go on. Marin smiled and kept driving. And deep in the bones of an old house, something finally understood what it meant to let go. And remain standing. Marin dreamed of knocking. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. 3 slow taps, repeated again and again, coming from somewhere she couldn't reach. She walked through empty rooms searching for the sound, her footsteps swallowed by thick carpet that felt more like soil than fabric. When she opened the door at the end of the hall, she didn't find a visitor. She found herself. Older. Paler. Standing very still. You forgot something, the other Marin said. She woke gasping. Her new apartment was dark and quiet. No creaking floors. No warmth blooming beneath her ribs. The city outside hummed faintly, cars, distant sirens, life moving on. And yet, her heart was racing. She pressed a hand to her chest. Nothing. No pressure. No presence. Still, she didn't go back to sleep. The next morning, she noticed the first sign. It was small enough that she might have ignored it if she hadn't learned better. Her coffee mug, ceramic, chipped along the rim, was warm before she poured anything into it. She stared at it for a long time. That's not possible, she whispered. The warmth faded. Marin set the mug down slowly and backed away, pulse ticking up. She checked the stove. Cold. The counter. Cold. Only the mug. Only where her hands had been. At work, she struggled to focus. Emails blurred together. Conversations drifted past her like fog. Twice, she caught herself staring at the wood grain of her desk, following the lines as if they might open into something deeper. Hey, her coworker Jenna said, leaning over the divider. You okay? You look spaced out. Marin forced a smile. Didn't sleep well. Jenna nodded sympathetically. Yeah. Something in the air lately. Everyone's exhausted. Marin's stomach dropped. Everyone? Seriously, Jenna said. You wouldn't believe the calls I've been getting. People just breaking down. Saying they need somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe. Marin's fingers curled slowly into her palm. That night, the knocking returned. Not on her door. On her dreams. 3 taps. Over and over. When she finally fell into shallow sleep, she dreamed of Morrow Road, not as it was, but as it used to be. Fresh paint. Children's voices. A woman standing in the doorway, watching someone leave with a hand raised in farewell. The house did not follow. It stayed. Marin woke with tears on her face and a single thought lodged firmly in her mind. You can dismantle a house, but you can't erase what it taught. On her kitchen table sat something she did not remember bringing home. A small wooden splinter. Smooth. Warm. Carved faintly with a single letter. Marin closed her eyes. Somewhere, not on Morrow Road, not in her apartment, but between, something old shifted in its sleep. Learning. Adapting. Marin didn't throw the splinter away. She meant to. She told herself she would. She even picked it up, carried it to the trash can, held it there between her fingers while the lid hovered open. But the wood felt familiar. Not comforting. Not warm in the way the house had been. Recognizing. She set it back on the table. By the end of the week, she began to notice them. Other doors. Not literal ones, though she did find herself paying closer attention to door frames, thresholds, entryways, but people. Ordinary people, scattered through the city, each carrying the same barely perceptible stillness she'd once carried herself. She saw it first on the bus. A man sat near the back, hands folded neatly in his lap, eyes half-lidded. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't awake either. The space around him felt muted, as if the noise of the bus dimmed when it reached him. A woman sat beside him without realizing why. She relaxed almost instantly. Marin felt a chill slide down her spine. At the grocery store, a teenage girl leaned against a freezer case, eyes unfocused. People drifted toward her, pausing near the end of the aisle, slowing down. One woman sighed and smiled faintly, as if she'd remembered something pleasant but couldn't quite place it. Marin pushed her cart past quickly. Not mine, she told herself. Not anymore. The thought didn't feel as solid as it should have. That night, Marin searched online. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, only that she'd recognize it when she saw it. She found a forum first. Poorly designed. Barely moderated. Thread title: Does anyone else make people calm just by being there? The posts were scattered. Rambling. Uncertain. People fall asleep around me. Is that normal? My roommates say the apartment feels quiet when I'm home. Sometimes strangers ask if they can sit near me. I don't know why. Marin's pulse quickened. One comment, posted just hours earlier, stopped her cold. I used to live near a house on a dead-end road. After I left, this started. Her hands trembled. She clicked the username. Private. Inactive. Marin closed her laptop and sat in the dark, the city humming faintly beyond the windows. So you didn't end it, she whispered. The splinter on the table pulsed faintly with warmth. Not answering. Agreeing. She understood then, slowly, reluctantly. The house hadn't ended. It had divided. It had learned a new way to exist. Not as one place, but as many. Carried. Shared. Quietly embedded in people who had brushed too close to its need and survived. Doors that walked. Marin pressed her palms to her thighs, grounding herself. I won't help you spread, she said firmly. The silence held. But somewhere across the city, a stranger sat on a park bench, eyes drifting closed as people gathered nearby, breathing easier without knowing why. And something old and patient smiled. Not from a house, but from within the spaces between people. Marin found her by accident. That's what she told herself later, at least, that it was coincidence, chance, nothing more than two people crossing paths in a city full of them. But the truth settled in her bones the moment she felt it. A familiar stillness. The woman sat on a bench near the river, hands folded loosely in her lap, posture relaxed but alert. She looked to be in her 40s, hair pulled back in a practical knot, face open in a way that invited conversation without asking for it. People drifted toward her. Not deliberately. Not all at once. They slowed as they passed. Sat nearby. One man leaned against the railing and closed his eyes, just for a second. A couple stopped arguing mid-sentence and laughed, confused but relieved. Marin's chest tightened. Something inside her whispered. The woman noticed Marin watching. She smiled. Not surprised. Relieved. You feel it too, don't you? The woman asked as Marin approached. Marin stopped a few feet away. You shouldn't be doing this. The woman tilted her head. Doing what? Letting them gather, Marin said. Letting it feed. The woman's smile faded, not into fear, but into something firmer. Resolve. I'm not feeding anything, she said. I'm giving them a place to breathe. That's what it told me too. The woman studied her more closely now. You came from a house. Marin's throat went dry. You did too. The woman nodded. Pine Hollow Road, Ohio. Burned down in the 90s. Marin's heart sank. There are others, the woman continued. More every year. We find each other eventually. And you just accept it? I accept what I am, she said gently. What it made me. Marin shook her head. It doesn't stop. It grows. It learns how to want. The woman glanced at the people nearby, calm, resting, present. So do humans. That's different. Is it? The woman asked. Or are we just better at pretending our hunger is harmless? Marin felt the splinter in her pocket warm faintly. You're opening yourself, she said. You don't know what it will take from you. The woman met her gaze, unflinching. I do. Time. Energy. Pieces of myself. Then why? Because, she said softly, no one else ever stayed open for me. The river moved steadily behind them. Marin realized, with a slow, sick certainty, that this woman wasn't being used. She was choosing. And that meant Marin was no longer fighting a house. She was standing at the beginning of a quiet, spreading philosophy. Doors that didn't want to close. Marin felt it before anything happened. A tightening in the air. A subtle pressure, like two weather fronts pushing against each other without yet breaking into storm. The calm around the bench wavered, people shifting, glancing around, suddenly aware they'd stopped moving. The woman straightened. You feel that too? Yes, Marin said. Her pulse ticked faster. This is what I warned you about. A man nearby stood abruptly, rubbing his arms. Did it get colder? The woman rose from the bench, eyes scanning the path. Someone else is close. The stillness shattered. Not violently, quietly. Like glass cracking without a sound. Marin turned and saw him, a young man standing at the edge of the park, hoodie pulled low, posture tense. The air around him felt dense, not soothing but heavy, pressing inward. People near him slowed too, but instead of relaxing, they looked unsettled. Anxious. Trapped. That's not rest, Marin whispered. That's hunger. The woman's jaw tightened. He hasn't learned yet. The young man took a step closer. The two fields, his and the woman's, collided. The effect was immediate. A woman between them staggered, clutching her head. A child began to cry, shrill and frightened. The calm fractured into confusion. Stop, Marin shouted, stepping forward. You're hurting them. The young man looked up sharply, eyes too bright. I didn't mean to, he said. They just come. That's the problem, Marin said. You let them. The woman moved beside Marin, her voice firm. You don't pull. You offer. I don't know how to stop, he said, panic breaking through. It gets worse when I try. The pressure surged, three forces now, overlapping. Marin felt her chest ache, the old warmth trying to spread again. She closed her eyes and withdrew. Not pushing away. Not pulling back. Closing. The effect rippled outward. The air steadied. People blinked, disoriented, then moved on, the moment already fading from memory. The young man sagged to his knees, gasping. The woman stared at Marin. "You can do that." Marin opened her eyes. "So can you. You just don't want to." The woman's face hardened. "Closing means choosing who doesn't get help. Opening without limits means choosing who gets hurt." Marin shot back. Silence fell between them. The young man looked up, eyes wet. "What am I supposed to be?" Marin crouched in front of him. "A door," she said. "Not a house. And not a mouth." The woman turned away, tension rolling off her. "You can't control everyone," she said. "Some of us will keep opening." Marin watched her walk down the path, the calm slowly reforming around her steps. She helped the young man to his feet. As they left the park, Marin understood something new and terrible. The danger wasn't the houses that learned to walk. It was the ones that disagreed about what they were for. Marin didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again, that pressure where the fields had overlapped in the park. Not pain exactly. Strain. Like stretching a joint past where it wanted to go. She sat on the edge of her bed, elbows on her knees, staring at the darkened room. "You don't have to fix this," she told herself. "You already stepped away once." But the thought wouldn't settle. Because she had seen the look on the young man's face when the pull finally stopped. Not relief, not gratitude, but terror. The terror of realizing what you might become if no one teaches you how to stop. The next morning, she met him at a coffee shop. His name was Eli. He sat across from her, shoulders hunched, hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup he hadn't drunk from. The shop buzzed with low conversation and clinking cups, but the space between them felt insulated, like a bubble of quiet pressed into the noise. "I thought I was losing my mind," Eli said. "People would slow down around me. Sit. Stare. Sometimes they wouldn't want to leave." Marin nodded. "Did it feel good?" He hesitated. Then nodded, ashamed. "At first. Then it felt like drowning, but backwards. Like I was too full. That's the danger," Marin said. "It teaches you that fullness is safety." Eli swallowed. "The woman in the park, she told me it was a gift." Marin's jaw tightened. "She would. She said closing was selfish." Marin leaned forward. "Closing is how you keep yourself, and them, from being taken." Eli looked up sharply. "Taken by what?" Marin held his gaze. "By the part of it that never learned how to let go." Silence stretched between them. Finally Eli asked, "How many are there?" Marin exhaled slowly. "More than there should be." That afternoon, she returned to the forum. The thread had grown. New posts stacked on top of one another, some calm, some panicked, some disturbingly eager. "I think I can help more people if I stop fighting it. Does anyone else feel empty when they close themselves? We could do real good if we work together." Marin's stomach churned. Someone had posted an invitation. Meetup, quiet space practitioners. Location shared privately. "They're organizing," she murmured. The splinter in her pocket warmed faintly, like a warning. Or a memory. That night, Marin stood by her window and looked out over the city. Lights blinked on and off in apartments and offices, thousands of small lives folding inward at the end of the day. She felt it again. The temptation. Not to feed. Not to pull. But to guide. If she didn't step in, others would decide what doors were for. And some of them, she was certain, would choose hunger. Marin closed her eyes. "I didn't ask to be responsible," she whispered. The silence answered back, not from a house, not from roots or walls, but from something that had learned to live in people now. "Neither did we." Marin straightened. "Then we learn," she said quietly. "Or we stop pretending this is harmless." She reached for her laptop. If doors were choosing sides, so would she. The location arrived an hour later. Not an address, just a pin dropped on a map, hovering over an abandoned community center on the edge of the city. The kind of place built with good intentions and forgotten when the funding dried up. Marin stared at the screen for a long time before closing her laptop. Just observe, she told herself. You don't interfere unless you have to. The words felt thin. The community center smelled like dust and old linoleum. Half the lights worked. The rest flickered, buzzing softly. Folding chairs were arranged in a loose circle, not tight, not confrontational. Inviting. There were more people than Marin expected. At least 15. They looked ordinary. Too ordinary. A man in business casual. A woman with a diaper bag slung over her shoulder. A college-aged kid with nervous energy vibrating through his legs. And beneath it all, that quiet. Layered. Overlapping. Untrained. Marin took a seat near the back. A woman stood in the center. Not the one from the park, but someone like her. Calm. Grounded. Smiling with the confidence of someone who believed they were doing good. Thank you for coming, the woman said. I know it's not easy to talk about what we are. What we are, Marin thought grimly. We're not broken, the woman continued. We're not dangerous. We're necessary. Several people nodded. We help people slow down, she said. Rest. Heal. In a world that doesn't allow it. Marin felt the air thicken slightly as the group leaned in, Fields responding to shared intention. The woman smiled wider. Imagine what we could do if we stopped working alone. Marin's chest tightened. A man raised his hand. Sometimes people don't want to leave, he said hesitantly. Is that wrong? The woman shook her head gently. It means they finally feel safe. Marin couldn't stay quiet. It means you're holding too long, she said, voice cutting through the room. Heads turned. The woman studied her. You're new. I'm experienced, Marin replied. And you're lying to yourselves? Murmurs rippled through the circle. Rest isn't the same as staying, Marin continued. If people can't leave, you're not helping them. You're replacing something. The woman's smile cooled. You sound afraid. I am, Marin said. Because I've seen where this goes. A young woman near the front spoke up, eyes bright. Maybe you just couldn't handle it. The quiet pressed closer. Marin stood. This isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. And if you don't learn how to close... A sharp creak echoed through the building. Not from the walls. From them. Several people swayed, breathing uneven. The woman in the center raised a hand. Enough. The pressure eased. She met Marin's gaze steadily. You're welcome to stay, she said. But don't sabotage what you don't understand. Marin grabbed her coat. I understand hunger, she said quietly. And this room is full of it. She left before anyone could stop her. Outside, the night air felt thin and sharp. Marin leaned against the brick wall, heart pounding. Because she'd seen it now. This wasn't a support group. It was the beginning of something organized. Something that believed the world owed it rest. No matter the cost. Marin didn't go home right away. She walked. Fast at first, then slower, letting the city thin around her until the streets grew quiet and the buildings gave way to long stretches of dark windows and closed storefronts. Her breath fogged faintly in the night air. The house was never the worst thing, she thought. It had been clumsy, lonely, hungry in a way that still remembered purpose. What she'd seen tonight was different, intentional. Her phone buzzed. ELI. They messaged me. Said you were unstable. Said I should stop talking to you. Marin stopped walking. What did you say? She typed. A pause. That I wanted to learn how to close. Relief loosened something in her chest. Good, she replied. They won't like that. Another message appeared almost immediately. They said closing is violence. Marin laughed softly, though it hurt. Of course they did. She reached her apartment building and stood outside for a long moment, studying the door. Just the door. Wood and glass and metal. No memory. No pull. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Normal. She sat at the kitchen table and spread out what she had. Notes scribbled after the meeting, forum usernames, fragments of stories she'd collected. Patterns emerged when she let herself look. Different houses. Different cities. Same lesson learned the wrong way. The splinter lay beside her notebook. She picked it up and felt, not warmth, but direction. Not toward people. Toward connection. They're talking to each other, she whispered. Sharing techniques. The house had learned from her how to divide itself. Now others were learning how to organize it. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. You made things uncomfortable tonight. Marin stared at the screen. Good, she typed back. Dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You don't get to decide what this becomes. Marin's fingers were steady now. Neither do you, she replied. But I get to stop pretending it's harmless. She turned the phone face down. Outside, somewhere across the city, a group of people gathered in a quiet room and leaned closer together, practicing how to hold the silence longer. And far away, on a dead-end road where a house finally knew how to be empty without pain, the wood settled uneasily, as if remembering what it had almost taught the world. Marin found the article buried 3 pages deep in a university archive. It wasn't indexed under psychology or sociology. It sat quietly in a local history journal, scanned from yellowed pages, the text slightly warped by age. The Quiet Incident of 1934. The title alone made her stomach tighten. She read slowly. It described a small town, unremarkable, unnamed by request of the surviving families, where people had begun gathering in one place without being asked. Not a church. Not a town hall. A private residence at the end of a dirt road. Witnesses reported neighbors, resting, there for hours. Sometimes days. Sometimes longer. No signs of force. No visible distress. Just an overwhelming reluctance to leave. Marin's pulse quickened as she read the line that followed. Those who attempted to remove their loved ones described the house as feeling crowded, though only 1 or 2 occupants were visible at any given time. Her hands trembled. Further down the page, a detail had been circled in red ink by the original researcher decades ago. After the house burned, the phenomenon did not end. It relocated. Marin leaned back in her chair. So it didn't start with you, she whispered to the memory of Morrow Road. You were just the most recent. The article continued. The phenomenon had followed a woman, a schoolteacher, described as calm, soft-spoken, easy to be around. After the fire, she moved frequently. Wherever she settled, people slowed, gathered, rested, until they didn't leave. The final note was handwritten, shaky. Containment failed due to disagreement among carriers. Marin closed the laptop. Her reflection in the dark screen looked pale, focused. This isn't new, she said aloud. It's cyclical. Hunger. Control. Collapse. Outside, a car passed, headlights briefly illuminating the room. Marin stood and grabbed her jacket. If this had happened before, then someone, somewhere, had tried to stop it. And if they'd failed, she needed to know why. The schoolteacher's name was Clara Hensley. It took Marin hours to find it, piecing together census fragments, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes digitized by volunteers who had no idea what they were preserving. Clara had lived quietly after the fire, moving every few years, never staying long enough to be noticed. Until she did. Clara died in 1961. Natural causes, according to the death certificate. But Marin noticed something strange. Clara hadn't died at home. She'd died visiting family. Marin followed the trail. The house still stood. Not abandoned. Not marked. Just an ordinary 2-story place in a quiet Midwestern town, paint recently refreshed, flower beds neatly kept. Children's bikes lay tipped over in the yard. Marin sat in her car across the street, heart thudding. She never stayed where she died, Marin realized. She learned. She knocked. A woman answered, mid-50s, kind eyes, wary smile. Can I help you? I'm researching Clara Hensley, Marin said carefully. She was your grandmother, the woman finished. Marin swallowed. Did she ever talk about people resting? The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. You should come in. Inside, the air felt normal. Too normal. No one ever stays long, the woman said quietly. Visitors always say they feel finished here, like they got what they needed. Marin's chest tightened. The warmth wasn't active. It was stored, contained. What did she do? Marin asked. The woman led her to a small room off the hallway. Inside sat a wooden chest. She learned how to stop, the woman said. But she didn't destroy it. She buried it. Inside the chest lay objects, splinters, carved symbols, fragments of old doors. Blueprints. Clara's solution hadn't been erasure. It had been inheritance. Marin closed her eyes. The cycle hadn't ended. It had been paused. Marin didn't touch the chest. She stood over it, hands clenched at her sides, feeling the quiet inside the room press outward. Not hungry, not calling. Contained. Like a held breath that had learned patience. So she didn't end it, Marin said softly. She archived it. The woman, Clara's granddaughter, Ruth, nodded. Grandmother said some things can't be destroyed. Only taught where to rest. Marin swallowed. Did she ever say why? Ruth's gaze drifted to the window. She said if you tried to end it, it finds a louder way to continue. That landed hard. Marin thought of the gathering. The park. The doors that wanted to stay open. And this? She asked, gesturing to the chest. It never wakes up. Sometimes, Ruth admitted. When someone in the family is very tired. Or grieving. The house doesn't call, it listens. And if you're careful, it stays asleep. Marin closed her eyes. She felt the splinter in her pocket warm faintly, responding to the quiet like a tuning fork. Careful how? She asked. Ruth hesitated. You don't let it decide who comes. And you don't let it decide how long they stay. A door, not a house. Marin's breast shuddered. And who keeps it now? Ruth met her eyes. No one. That's the point. We share the watch. Marin looked back at the chest. She understood the cost immediately. Sharing meant never letting it be someone else's problem. It meant living with the vigilance forever. No finish line. No relief. Permanence. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. We're meeting again. You should come. We can do this better. Marin didn't reply. She knelt and opened the chest just enough to feel the cool, dormant weight inside. Not pulling. Not feeding. Waiting. If I take this, Marin said quietly, it won't end. It'll just change hands. Ruth nodded. That's what Clara believed. Marin stood. She felt the city far away. The gathering closer. The future narrowing into a single choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. Then I won't take it, she said. I'll build something else. Ruth frowned. What? Marin pocketed the splinter and turned toward the door. A way to close that doesn't require a keeper. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and indifferent. Marin stepped into it, already feeling the weight of what she decided to attempt. Because if permanence was the price, she would find a way to pay it once, instead of asking the world to keep paying forever. Marin didn't tell Eli what she was planning. She didn't tell anyone. Plans like this had a way of changing shape when too many people looked at them, softening at the edges, bending toward comfort. She couldn't afford that. Not now. She rented the space anonymously, a disused storefront on a side street that never quite gentrified. Brick walls. High ceilings. One narrow door in front, one emergency exit in back. No windows at street level. Neutral ground. Inside, she set it up carefully. No chairs in circles. No soft lighting. No signals of welcome that might invite lingering. Just benches along the walls, spaced evenly, and a long strip of bare floor down the center. "This isn't a shelter," she murmured as she worked. "It's a passage." She taped a simple sign to the door. "Quiet space, 15 minutes max. Nothing more." The rules mattered. Marin wrote them on a clipboard and pinned them beside the door. "Enter alone. Sit anywhere. Leave when the timer sounds. Do not touch anyone. Do not return the same day." She set a large digital timer where everyone could see it. 15 minutes. Not enough to disappear. Enough to breathe. She tested herself before opening. She stood in the center of the room and felt inward, not for warmth, not for pull, but for edges. She practiced closing, the way she'd learned, drawing the quiet tight around herself until it was contained, directional. A corridor. Not a nest. When she opened the door for the first time, the street outside looked unchanged. A man walked past without slowing. A woman glanced in, then kept going. Good. Then, slowly, someone stopped. A middle-aged man in a wrinkled jacket. He hesitated, read the sign, frowned. 15 minutes? He asked. "Yes," Marin said. "That's all." He stepped inside. The timer began. The experiment worked. Too well. Word spread, not loudly, not publicly, but through the same quiet channels that had always carried the need. People came one at a time. They sat. They breathed. When the timer sounded, they startled, stood, and left, confused, lighter still themselves. Marin felt no hunger. No pull. Only strain. Because holding the quiet in motion, never letting it settle, hurt. By the end of the second day, she was shaking. On the third night, she found the door unlocked when she arrived. Someone was already inside. Not resting. Waiting. A woman stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, smiling with practiced calm. "You're doing it wrong," the woman said. Marin recognized her instantly. From the gathering. "You're wasting potential," the woman continued. "We've been watching." Marin's chest tightened, not with warmth. With danger. Because the experiment hadn't just drawn the tired. It had drawn the hungry. Marin didn't move. The woman in the center of the room, Lena, she remembered now, stood perfectly still, as if she were anchoring herself to the floor. The air around her felt tight, compressed, like a room with too many people holding their breath. "You shouldn't be here," Marin said. Lena smiled wider. "You posted the sign. You opened the door." "For 15 minutes," Marin replied. "And you didn't come to rest." "No," Lena agreed. "I came to see how you're doing it." Marin stepped inside and shut the door behind her. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. The room responded with a faint vibration, alert, but not welcoming. "You're hurting yourself," Lena said lightly. "All that closing. All that control. You look exhausted." "That's the point," Marin said. "If it costs something, you don't abuse it." Lena laughed softly. "You really think people won't?" "They can't," Marin said. "Not here." Lena walked slowly toward the benches, trailing her fingers along the wall. The quiet followed her hand, thickening. "Your mistake," Lena said, "is thinking limits are neutral. They're not. They're power." Marin felt the corridor she'd built begin to waver. "Step back." Lena didn't. "I could turn this into something bigger," Lena continued. "Something sustainable. Rotations. Longer sessions. Shared holding." "No," Marin snapped. "That's how people disappear. That's how people stay," Lena countered. "You're afraid of what happens when the quiet lasts." "I've seen it," Marin said. "It stops being quiet." Lena finally met her eyes. "You don't get to decide that alone." Marin inhaled slowly and did the hardest thing she'd learned. She closed completely. The quiet snapped inward like a door slamming shut, not violent, not loud, but absolute. The room emptied of pressure. The walls became walls again. The air thinned. Lena staggered, grabbing the back of a bench. "What did you..." You don't get access, Marin said calmly. Not here. Not like this. Lena's smile was gone now. You can't keep this from us forever. I don't have to, Marin replied. Just long enough. Lena straightened, eyes cold. You've declared a side. Marin nodded. So have you. When Lena left, the room sagged, not relieved, but strained, like a muscle held too long. Marin locked the door and slid down against it, shaking. Because she knew the truth now. Limits worked. And that meant the people who wanted more would never stop trying to break them. Marin shut the space down 2 days later. Not because it failed. Because it worked. Too many people had started hovering outside the storefront, not tired enough to enter, not desperate enough to knock. They lingered in 2s and 3s, glancing at the door, glancing at each other, feeling something they didn't have language for. Anticipation. That was the danger. She taped a new sign to the door. Closed, do not wait. It didn't stop them. She watched from across the street as a man sat on the curb, eyes closed, breathing slowly. A woman stood nearby with her arms wrapped around herself, rocking gently on her heels. They weren't being pulled. They were choosing to stay close. Marin's chest ached, not with warmth, not with hunger, but with a deep, grinding grief. This is why houses get built, she whispered. That night, Eli came to her apartment unannounced. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, dark circles under his eyes, jaw clenched tight, the quiet around him frayed and uneven. They found me, he said. Marin stepped aside immediately. Who? The group. Lena's group. They say you're hoarding access. Marin closed the door behind him. I'm preventing collapse. They don't see it that way, Eli said. They're setting up their own spaces. Her stomach dropped. Where? Everywhere, he said hoarsely. No limits. No timers. They call it deep rest. Marin pressed her hand to her forehead. That's how people disappear. They say you're afraid of power, Eli continued. That you want to control something that should belong to everyone. Marin laughed softly. That's what everyone says right before they build a cage. Eli's hands trembled. They want me to help. I told them no. Relief flickered through her, brief and fragile. Thank you. But, he added quietly, I don't know how long I can hold out. It hurts to close all the time. Marin's voice softened. I know. She looked at him, not as a problem to solve, not as a door to manage, but as a person paying the same cost she was. Being right doesn't make it easier, Eli said. No, Marin agreed. It just makes it lonely. The first report came 3 days later. A woman hadn't come home. Her last message to her sister read, I found somewhere quiet. I just need a little more time. The second report followed that night. Then another. Marin sat in her dark apartment, phone glowing with news alerts, feeling the weight of it pressed down, not guilt, not blame, but inevitability. She had slowed the spread, not stopped it. Because limits required agreement. And hunger didn't agree. Somewhere in the city, a space without timers filled with people who didn't want to leave. And somewhere deep in Marin's memory, the house on Morrow Road creaked, not in triumph, not in warning, but in recognition. Because this was the moment it had never survived before. The moment when someone tried to end the cycle instead of inheriting it. Marin read the missing persons report slowly. Not like someone searching for hope. Like someone cataloging damage. Names. Ages. Last known locations. Patterns emerged whether she wanted them to or not. All the disappearances clustered around 3 addresses. Spaces Lena's group had opened in abandoned buildings, churches after hours, empty offices rented cheaply and quietly. Deep rest. No limits. No exits marked. Eli sat across from her at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched. They say this is the price of progress, he said. That panic always comes before acceptance. Marin closed her laptop. That's not acceptance. That's anesthesia. Eli flinched. Are you going to stop them? She didn't answer right away. Because this was the part no one talked about. Intervention wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. It meant stepping into a system already feeding itself and pulling hard. And pulling had consequences. If I shut them down, Marin said finally, they'll scatter. They'll open smaller spaces. Harder to track. Harder to limit. And if you don't? Eli asked. Marin pictured the room she'd seen in her dreams, crowded with sleeping bodies, breaths sinking, selves dissolving into shared quiet. They'll learn the wrong lesson, she said. That disappearance feels like peace. Eli's voice dropped. And if they have to learn it the hard way? Marin looked at him then. Really looked. At the lines of strain around his eyes. At the way he leaned inward, like he was holding himself close by force of will. No, she said softly. That's what the house tried to teach me. She stood and grabbed her jacket. Where are you going? Eli asked. To the biggest space, Marin said. The one they're most proud of. Eli swallowed. That's dangerous. Yes, Marin agreed. Because if I'm wrong, if limits really are just fear dressed up as ethics, then I won't be able to stop myself. She paused at the door. And if I'm right, she continued, then I have to be willing to be hated for it. Outside, the night was quiet in that watchful way she'd come to recognize. Not hungry, not calm. Waiting. Marin stepped into it, knowing this was the point of no return. Because some lessons only end when someone decides they're not worth repeating. The building used to be a church. You could still see it in the bones, the high arched ceiling, the long central aisle, the faint outline of stained glass windows now boarded over from the outside. The pews were gone. In their place were mattresses. Dozens of them. Neatly arranged. Close enough that hands could touch if they reached. Marin stopped just inside the door. The quiet here was thick. Not peaceful. Not gentle. Pressurized. It pushed against her ears, her lungs, her thoughts, flattening them into something slow and heavy. Her knees weakened instantly. She understood, in a visceral way, why people stayed. This wasn't rest. It was surrender. Lena stood at the far end of the room, barefoot, eyes closed, arms slightly out from her sides as if she were balancing on an invisible wire. Around her, people slept, or something close to it. Some breathed deeply. Others barely moved at all. Marin, Lena said without opening her eyes. You feel it now. Marin took a step forward and nearly fell. The pull was stronger than anything she'd felt since the house itself. Yes, Marin said through clenched teeth. I feel it. Good, Lena replied. Then stop pretending this is wrong. Marin forced another step. The quiet wrapped tighter around her chest, eager now, recognizing something familiar. House, it whispered, not aloud, but in the same wordless language she'd once known too well. She closed her eyes and felt herself thinning. Not fading. Expanding. This was the danger. Not hunger. Relief. Look at them, Lena said softly. No fear. No pain. No loneliness. You take that away? Marin opened her eyes. She saw it now, the subtle distortion in the room. The way the ceiling felt lower than it should be. The way the walls leaned inward. The way the sleepers' outlines blurred slightly at the edges, as if the room were forgetting where they ended. They're disappearing, Marin said. Lena smiled. They're merging. The quiet surged. Marin felt her own boundaries soften. Felt how easy it would be to let go. To become the center of this space. To hold everyone and be held back. The house had wanted this. Not a place. A state. No, Marin whispered, digging her nails into her palms. Pain helped. Pain marked edges. This is what happens when no one leaves. She stepped forward again, and the room reacted. The sleepers stirred. Some frowned. One man gasped softly, like surfacing from deep water. Lena's eyes snapped open. What are you doing? Closing, Marin said hoarsely. She pulled inward, not violently, not suddenly, but completely. She drew the quiet tight around herself, refusing to let it pull, refusing to let it settle. The room screamed. Not aloud. Structurally. The walls creaked. The air thinned. People woke coughing, confused, crying out. Lena staggered. Stop! You're hurting them! They were already hurt. Marin shouted. You just couldn't hear it anymore. The pull fought her now, harder than ever before. Marin felt herself slipping. If she failed here, if she opened even a fraction, this place would make her its heart, and she would never leave. The pressure peaked. Marin felt it everywhere at once, behind her eyes, between her ribs, down her spine. The quiet wasn't quiet anymore. It was weight, bearing down with the full force of everything that had ever wanted to stay and never leave. The room bent. Not metaphorically. Literally. The ceiling groaned, beams flexing as if remembering another shape. The walls bowed inward, the edges of the space rounding, softening, trying to become what it knew best. A house. A container. A place where leaving was optional and staying was forever. Marin! Eli's voice cut through the strain. She hadn't heard him enter. She hadn't felt the door open. He stood just inside the threshold, face pale, eyes wide as he took in the sight of the room full of waking sleepers and Lena bracing herself at the center like a pillar under too much weight. You shouldn't be here, Marin gasped. Eli shook his head. Neither should they. That mattered. Not because he agreed with her, but because he'd chosen to enter knowing what it would cost. Lena cried out as the quiet shifted, no longer obeying her. You're tearing it apart. Yes, Marin said, teeth clenched. That's what release feels like when you've mistaken holding for care. She felt the pull change then. Not toward Lena. Toward her. The room recognized Marin as something older. More complete. A structure that could hold and open. The quiet surged, trying to seat itself in her chest, to make her the new center. For one terrifying second, she wanted it. The exhaustion lifted. The pain faded. The loneliness vanished. She could end all of it right now. She could become the room. She could become the rest everyone wanted. No, Marin whispered. She remembered the mug warming too soon. The splinter carved with her initial. The house that had learned to let go and still stand. She chose the hardest thing. She let the quiet pass through her. Not stop. Not pull. Move. The effect was immediate and violent. The room convulsed as if hit by a sudden wind. Mattresses slid. People cried out as the pressure lifted too fast, lungs burning as they pulled in sharp, painful breaths. The walls snapped back into their proper angles. The ceiling rose. The quiet fled, not destroyed, not banished, but unseated. Lena screamed as the center she'd built collapsed. She fell to her knees, gasping. You don't understand. I do, Marin said softly, swaying but still standing. That's why this can't exist. One by one, people sat up. Confused. Shaken. The pull was gone. Not replaced. Just gone. The building was only a building again. Marin's legs gave out. Eli caught her before she hit the floor. You did it, he whispered. She shook her head weakly. I stopped it. That's different. Outside, sirens wailed. Someone had finally called for help. Inside, the quiet did not return. And somewhere, in the deep memory of houses and doors and people who carry too much, something learned fear. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue light bled through the boarded windows, stuttering across the walls like a heartbeat struggling to steady itself. People sat up slowly, blinking, coughing, holding their heads as if waking from a dream that refused to fade cleanly. Some cried. Some shouted. Some simply stared at their hands, turning them over like they were surprised to still have them. Marin lay on the floor, her cheek pressed to cold tile. She felt empty. Not relieved empty. Not peaceful empty. The kind of emptiness you feel after lifting something impossibly heavy and finally setting it down, arms shaking, muscles screaming, bones unsure how to exist without the weight. Eli knelt beside her. "Stay with me," he said, voice tight. "Just breathe." She did. Each breath hurt. The quiet was gone. Not dormant. Not contained. Gone. And in its absence, something else crept in. Noise. Fear. Reality. Lena sat against the far wall, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked smaller now. Ordinary. Her voice shook when she spoke. "You broke it," she whispered. Marin turned her head slightly. "No. I refuse to replace it." Lena laughed weakly. "You think this is better?" She gestured at the room, at the panic, the confusion, the people clutching one another like survivors of a shipwreck. "They were happy. They were gone," Marin said. "There's a difference." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "You don't get to decide who needs that kind of peace." Marin closed her eyes. "Neither did you." Footsteps thundered outside. A door slammed open somewhere in the building. Voices shouted, official, clipped, frightened. Help had arrived. Too late to understand what they'd missed. Too early to know what they'd stopped. The questioning took hours. They separated everyone. Asked the same questions again and again. Why were you here? How long had you been staying? Did anyone keep you from leaving? No one had answers that satisfied them. Marin sat wrapped in a scratchy emergency blanket, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The officers looked at her like she was fragile, suspicious, or both. "What exactly were you running here?" one asked. Marin opened her mouth. Closed it. "There was a quiet," she said finally. "And it got too big." They exchanged looks. She was dismissed eventually, not because they believed her, but because they didn't know what else to do with her. Lena wasn't so lucky. Outside, dawn broke pale and thin. Marin stood on the sidewalk, watching as people were loaded into ambulances or reunited with family members who clutched them too tightly. Eli stood beside her, silent. "Do you feel it?" he asked finally. Marin searched herself. There was no warmth in her chest. No pressure. No pull. "I don't feel anything," she said. Eli swallowed. "That scares me." "It should," Marin replied softly. Because she knew what it meant. The quiet hadn't chosen someone else. It hadn't retreated. It had learned. And next time, it wouldn't need a room. The city didn't change all at once. That was the cruelest part. If buildings had collapsed or people had started dropping into sleep in the streets, someone would have noticed. Someone would have named it. Panic would have followed, loud and public. Instead, the quiet adapted. It became polite. Marin noticed it first on the bus. Not the stillness she remembered, not the heavy, syrup-thick calm that pressed people together, but a gap. A soft pocket of nothing that appeared between conversations, between stops, between thoughts. A man missed his exit and didn't care. A woman stared out the window for 10 minutes longer than necessary. No one slept. No one gathered. They just paused. Marin's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "That's new," she whispered. By the end of the week, the pauses had spread. At crosswalks, people lingered after the light changed, blinking as if waking from a thought they couldn't remember starting. In offices, meetings ran long, not because of arguments, but because no one felt urgency anymore. Deadlines softened. Voices lowered. Edges blurred. Eli noticed it too. "They're not disappearing," he said one evening as they walked. "They're thinning." Marin nodded. "The quiet doesn't need to hold them now. It just needs to interrupt." They passed a cafe where no music played, though the speakers were on. Inside, customers sat with their drinks cooling, eyes unfocused, hands wrapped around mugs like anchors. No one looked unhappy. That was the problem. News outlets began calling it the lull. A viral think piece described it as post-crisis fatigue. Another called it Collective burnout finally expressing itself. Therapists reported patients feeling oddly neutral about things that once caused distress. And somewhere, buried in a comment thread, someone wrote, "I don't feel sad. I just don't feel like leaving where I am." Marin closed the laptop. "It's not feeding," she said. "It's teaching the world how to stop moving." Eli leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "You stopped the rooms. You stopped the houses. What else could it want?" Marin stared out the window at the city lights, each one steady, distant, self-contained. "It wants permanence without walls," she said. "It wants rest without responsibility. It wants a world that never quite gets up again." That night, Marin dreamed for the first time in weeks. Not of houses. Not of doors. Of a city frozen mid-breath. People stood exactly where they were, eyes open, bodies upright, paused. No fear. No struggle. Just the gentle absence of motion. And threading through them all was something invisible and patient, no longer a structure, no longer a presence. A habit. When she woke, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You broke the container. Now we're everywhere." Marin sat up slowly, heart pounding. Because she understood now. The house hadn't been the danger. The carriers hadn't been the danger. The danger was that the quiet had finally learned how to live the way humans do. By becoming normal. Marin stopped trying to feel for the quiet. That was the first mistake she almost made. Every instinct she had, learned in the house, sharpened in the rooms, refined through pain, told her to listen inward. To search for pressure, warmth, pull. But there was nothing to find. The quiet didn't live in people anymore. It lived between them. That was why it was winning. She sat on a park bench and watched the afternoon unravel. Parents pushed children on swings without speaking. Dogs lay beside their owners instead of tugging at leashes. A man sat on the grass staring at his phone, thumb unmoving, screen dark. No distress. No urgency. No reason to intervene. "This is how it hides," Marin whispered. "By feeling like relief." Eli sat beside her, elbows on his knees. "If no one's being hurt, how do we stop it?" Marin didn't answer right away. Because that was the question the quiet was betting no one would ask hard enough. That evening, she visited a hospital. Not the ER. Not the psych ward. The waiting room. She sat quietly and listened. A woman had been waiting 4 hours for test results. She wasn't pacing. Wasn't anxious. She simply sat, hands folded, eyes soft. "I don't mind," the woman told the nurse apologetically. "It's nice not to rush." A man missed his name being called. Twice. When someone finally touched his shoulder, he startled violently, like he'd been pulled out of deep water. Marin felt something twist in her chest. Not quiet. Fear. "They're losing friction," she murmured. Eli frowned. "What?" "The world works because things push back," Marin said. "Time. Consequences. Wanting things enough to move." She watched the woman smile faintly at the wall. "Comfort smooths all of that away." The forums changed tone. No more talk of houses. No more doors. No more techniques. Just posts like, "I don't want anything anymore, and it feels amazing. Is it okay if I stop trying? Does anyone else feel done?" Marin typed a response once. Then deleted it. You couldn't argue with comfort. You couldn't warn someone away from relief without sounding cruel. And the quiet knew it. She understood then what the final shape of this would be. Not a catastrophe. Not an apocalypse. A world where no one fought to leave the room they were already in. Where ambition softened. Where resistance felt unnecessary. Where history slowed until it barely moved. A world that stayed. "This is what it wanted all along," Marin said softly. "Not people. Not houses. A culture." Eli looked at her, eyes dark. "Then what do we do?" Marin closed her eyes. She remembered pain. Remembered effort. Remembered the terrible, beautiful weight of choosing to move anyway. We make discomfort loud again, she said. Eli swallowed. People will hate us. Yes, Marin agreed. Because we'll be taking away something they think they deserve. She stood. The quiet flowed around her, unnoticed, like water around a stone. And for the first time since the house on Morrow Road, Marin felt something solid beneath her feet. Purpose. Marin started small. She had to. Anything too loud, too sudden, would only drive the quiet deeper, make it retreat, adapt, wait. She'd learned that lesson from houses and rooms and people who wanted to stay forever. So she chose places where discomfort used to live naturally. Gyms. Libraries during finals week. Factories at shift change. Places where effort mattered. She didn't shout. She didn't disrupt. She interrupted the lull. The first time, she stood in a public gym during the late afternoon. Rows of machines occupied by people moving slowly, half-heartedly, eyes unfocused. No music played, though earbuds were in. Sweat dried on skin that barely worked for it. Marin stepped onto the floor. And she opened. Not to the quiet. To resistance. She focused on edges, on friction, on gravity, on the ache of muscles asked to do more than they wanted. She remembered pain not as harm, but as information. The effect was immediate. Someone grunted in surprise as a weight suddenly felt heavier. A woman on a treadmill stumbled, then laughed breathlessly as her heart rate spiked. Music burst from speakers someone hadn't touched. What the hell? A man muttered, shaking out his arms. The quiet recoiled. Not gone, but disrupted. Marin staggered, sweat breaking out along her spine. It hurt. Good. She tried again at a university library. Students sat staring at screens, hours slipping past unnoticed. Marin walked the aisles and grounded herself in urgency, deadlines, consequences, the sharp discomfort of not being ready. Panic fluttered. A student gasped, blinking hard. Oh my God, I'm so behind. Another slammed a laptop shut and stood abruptly. I need coffee. The quiet thinned. Marin leaned against the shelf, shaking. Eli waited outside, watching her with open concern. You look like you ran a marathon. She smiled weakly. It's worse. The news didn't cover it. Not at first. But social media noticed. Posts appeared. Anyone else feel like the fog lifted today? I hated it. Also, I got so much done. Why am I suddenly stressed again? Comment sections exploded. Some people were furious. Others relieved. The quiet didn't vanish. But it stuttered. It learned pain was back on the table. That night, Marin collapsed onto her bed, muscles screaming, mind buzzing. Every nerve felt scraped raw. She hadn't just closed or redirected something. She had weaponized effort. Eli sat on the edge of the bed. You can't do this everywhere. I don't have to, Marin said hoarsely. I just have to remind the world what movement feels like. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're hurting people, the message read. Marin typed back with shaking hands. I'm waking them up. The reply came instantly. Comfort is not the enemy. Marin stared at the screen, then set the phone aside. No, she whispered into the dark. But numbness is. Outside, the city hummed, uneven now, imperfect, alive. And somewhere in that unevenness, the quiet learned something it had never tolerated before. Resistance hurt. And hurt didn't fade. The quiet didn't retaliate with force. That was what Marin expected, and feared, but the quiet had never been violent. It had always been persuasive. It learned by watching, adapting its shape until resistance felt unnecessary. So when it answered, it did so gently. Kindly. Perfectly. It began with sleep. Not the heavy, depthless sinking Marin had seen before, but perfect sleep. 8 hours that felt like 12. Dreams that resolved cleanly. Waking without grogginess, without dread. People posted about it everywhere. I slept like I used to as a kid. No nightmares. No stress dreams. Whatever's happening out there, this part is amazing. Marin's stomach twisted. This is smarter, she said. Eli nodded grimly. It's not stopping effort. It's compensating for it. Exactly. The quiet no longer erased discomfort. It rewarded endurance. Then came focus. People reported hours of concentration without fatigue. Workdays passed smoothly. Long-standing projects finished themselves without the usual friction. It's like the fog clears when I need it to, Jenna told Marin at work. I still hate deadlines, but they don't crush me anymore. Marin smiled tightly. The quiet had learned to coexist, to blend. Worst of all was the third offering. Meaning. People began describing a sense of completion, not happiness, not peace, but the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they should be. That no effort they made was wasted. That no path they hadn't taken mattered. A man interviewed on a late-night show said, I don't feel driven anymore. But I don't feel lost either. I feel done. The audience applauded. Marin shut off the TV. That's it, she whispered. That's the hook. Eli rubbed his face. If people feel whole, how do we argue with that? Marin didn't answer. Because she couldn't. You couldn't fight something that gave people rest and purpose without asking anything in return. Except one thing. Time. She felt it that night, lying awake. Not pressure. Not pull. An invitation. A whisper threaded through the spaces between her thoughts. You don't have to carry this. Her muscles loosened involuntarily. You can stop. She sat up, heart pounding. You're not allowed to talk to me, she said aloud. The quiet didn't deny it. It didn't have to. Because it wasn't speaking to her anymore. It was speaking around her. To everyone else. And that was the moment Marin understood the final shape of the threat. The quiet didn't want a world that stopped. It wanted a world that never needed to be pushed again. A world that mistook stillness for fulfillment. A world where effort became optional. And in such a world, no one would fight to leave. The offer came without drama. No messages. No dreams. No voices threading through the dark. Just the door. Marin noticed it on her way home from work. A narrow doorway between a closed florist and a nail salon she was certain hadn't existed yesterday. The sign above it was blank. The glass was clean, reflecting the street perfectly. Too perfectly. She stopped walking. The city noise dulled slightly, not gone, just softened, like someone had turned down the volume on the world by one careful notch. Eli, walking beside her, didn't notice. That was how she knew it was meant for her alone. Inside the doorway, she could see a simple room. White walls. Wooden floor. No furniture. No corners that leaned or bent or remembered. A clean exit. Her chest loosened painfully. You can leave, the quiet promised, not in words but in certainty. You've done enough. You don't have to be the one who keeps hurting people to wake them up. Her knees trembled. Because it wasn't lying. If she stepped inside, the quiet would stop pushing against her. The exhaustion would lift. The ache of vigilance would finally end. The world would continue its slow settling, and she wouldn't have to fight it anymore. Hey, Eli said, finally noticing she'd stopped. What's wrong? She looked at him. At the lines of strain she'd helped carve into his face. At the effort it took him to stay sharp in a world that was learning how to blur itself into comfort. It's offering me an exit, she said softly. Eli went still. A what? A way out, she repeated. No more doors. No more resistance. No more choosing to be uncomfortable. He swallowed. Is it real? Yes, Marin said. That's the problem. The doorway waited. Not pulling. Not rushing. Patient. Because patience had always been the quiet's greatest strength. If you go, Eli said carefully, what happens to everything you've been doing? Marin looked at the street. At people moving, slowly, comfortably, content in ways that made her skin itch. It keeps happening, she said. Just without interference. And if you stay, She closed her eyes. I keep hurting, she said. And I keep making enemies. And I keep being the person who says no when everyone else is finally comfortable. The door did not change. It did not threaten. It did not plead. It simply existed, offering the most seductive thing imaginable. Relief without consequences. Marin took one step toward it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message, from a number she hadn't seen in weeks. Ruth, Clara Hensley's granddaughter. It's happening again, isn't it? Marin stopped. She thought of Clara. Of archiving. Of inheritance. Of the way cycles didn't end, they waited. She thought of the house on Morrow Road, standing quietly, empty but intact, because someone had stayed long enough to teach it how to let go. The door shimmered faintly. You don't owe them this, the quiet insisted. Marin opened her eyes. No, she whispered. But I owe them a chance to choose. She stepped back. The doorway vanished as if it had never been there. The city noise rushed in all at once, honks, voices, footsteps colliding imperfectly. Eli let out a shaky breath. You okay? Marin nodded, though her legs felt weak. That was the hardest thing it could offer, she said. Because it wasn't evil. They walked on. Behind them, the quiet adjusted, learning, recalibrating. And somewhere deep in its new, formless mind, it marked Marin not as an enemy, but as an obstacle that would not remove itself. The backlash didn't start with anger. It started with concern. Articles appeared first, carefully worded, empathetic pieces questioning whether the recent anti-law disruptions were doing more harm than good. Is stress really the answer? Who benefits from reintroducing discomfort? When does waking people up become cruelty? Marin read them with a sinking feeling. Because none of them were wrong. They just weren't complete. Then came the interviews. Experts, neuroscientists, behavioral economists, wellness influencers, spoke calmly into cameras about how society had been overcorrecting for productivity, and how the lull might actually represent a healthy recalibration. One woman smiled gently and said, Some people are afraid of rest because they don't know who they are without striving. Marin shut off the TV. That's me, she whispered. That's what they're making me. Eli leaned against the counter, arms crossed. They're not even lying, he said. They're just omitting you. Exactly, Marin replied. But quiet doesn't need to stop me. It just needs to make me unnecessary. The first protest happened outside a gym. Not violent. Not loud. People stood holding signs with soft colors and rounded lettering. Let people rest. Stop forcing stress. Comfort is care. Marin watched from across the street, stomach twisting. A woman being interviewed said, Some people think they know what's best for everyone. We don't need to be saved from peace. That night, Marin's inbox filled. Emails. DMs. Messages from strangers. Why are you making things harder? My anxiety came back after one of your interruptions. Who gave you the right? Her hands shook as she scrolled. They weren't threats. They were worse. They were hurt. The quiet had done something brilliant. It had turned resistance into harm, and Marin into a villain. Eli slammed his laptop shut. This is bullshit. Marin shook her head slowly. No. This is strategy. She felt it then, not warmth, not pressure, but a narrowing. The spaces where she could act were shrinking, socially, ethically. Every move now risked reinforcing the story the quiet was telling. That she was outdated. That she was cruel. That she couldn't let people have what they wanted. What if they're right? Eli asked quietly. Marin didn't answer immediately. Because she'd asked herself the same question. Late at night. When her body ached. When the quiet seemed so gentle, so reasonable. What if I'm just afraid of a world that doesn't need pain anymore? She looked out the window at the city, slower now, softer, smiling more often. Then she remembered the man in the waiting room who missed his name being called. The people who didn't leave. The rooms that forgot their edges. They're right about one thing, Marin said at last. I am afraid. Of what? Of a world that gives up the ability to choose discomfort, she said. Because once that choice is gone, so is every other one. Her phone buzzed. A new headline alert. Activists linked to anti-lull disruptions identified. Marin closed her eyes. Because now it wasn't just an argument. It was personal. And the quiet had learned the oldest lesson of all. If you can't stop the idea, discredit the person carrying it. Marin packed a single backpack. Not because she planned to run far, just far enough to stop being a symbol. Her name was trending now, stripped of context and shaped into something sharp and easy to aim at. Anti-lull extremist. Stress advocate. Disruption figure. None of it was untrue enough to dismiss. She left her apartment before dawn, hood pulled low, phone powered off. The city felt different now, not hostile, not threatening, but politely indifferent. People moved with soft purpose, eyes half-lit with contentment, stepping around her without really seeing her. She had never felt so alone. She took refuge in a place the quiet hadn't fully learned yet. A closed train depot on the edge of town, scheduled for demolition but delayed by budget reviews and bureaucratic drift. The air inside smelled like oil and dust and old metal, uncomfortable smells. Honest ones. Eli found her there hours later. You shouldn't have come, she said when she saw him. I wasn't followed, he replied. Most people don't notice anything they don't want to. They sat on overturned crates, the silence between them raw and unsoftened. I don't know how to fight this anymore, Marin admitted. Every move I make proves their point. Eli stared at the rusted tracks. Then maybe it's not about fighting. She looked at him sharply. I've been thinking, he continued, about who isn't affected. Children, Marin said immediately. They resist it longer. And people in crisis, Eli added. Acute pain still cuts through. And the elderly, Marin said. The ones who've already lived with discomfort long enough that it doesn't scare them. Eli nodded slowly. The quiet doesn't reach everyone equally. Marin felt something shift, not hope, not relief, but direction. It's not universal, she murmured. It just pretends to be. That night, someone else came. An older woman with silver hair pulled into a tight braid, wearing a heavy coat despite the mild weather. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She simply stood at the edge of the depot until Marin noticed her. You're hard to find, the woman said calmly. Marin rose, tense. Who are you? The woman smiled faintly. Someone who remembers the first time this happened. Marin's breath caught. You're not Clara, the woman said. But I knew her. I was a child when the house burned. Eli stood slowly. You shouldn't be here. I know, the woman replied. That's why I came. She met Marin's gaze, eyes sharp and unsoftened by the quiet. You're doing it backwards. Marin swallowed. Then tell me how to do it right. The woman shook her head. You can't stop the quiet by making noise. Then how? You remind people what wanting feels like, she said. Not discomfort. Desire. Marin frowned. That's not the same thing. No, the woman agreed. It's stronger. She stepped closer. The quiet thinned around her, like it didn't know how to settle. Pain teaches limits, the woman continued. But wanting teaches movement. Marin felt tears prick her eyes. Because she understood. The quiet didn't erase pain, it erased longing. The ache that made people choose, reach, risk. The woman placed something on the crate between them. A small, cracked photograph. A house. Burning. And people running towards something else. You don't need to be the door anymore, the woman said softly. You need to remind the world why it used to knock. Marin didn't sleep that night. Not because she couldn't, but because sleep felt like the wrong shape for what came next. She sat on the edge of the platform inside the old depot, legs dangling over the dark tracks. listening to the building settle and creak in ways that were honest and uncomfortable. "Want?" she said quietly, tasting the word. The woman, her name was Iris, she'd finally offered, nodded. The quiet numbs hunger by filling it with nothing. You don't fight nothing with pain. You fight it with direction. Eli frowned. People want comfort. They want certainty, Iris corrected. Comfort just pretends to be it. Marin felt something click into place, not an answer, but a framework. Want is specific, Marin said slowly. It has edges. It points somewhere. Iris smiled. Exactly. The quiet hates edges. They started the next morning. Not with speeches. Not with disruptions. With questions. Marin went where the quiet was strongest. Cafes where people lingered too long. Parks where movement had softened into stillness. She sat beside strangers and asked one simple thing. What are you looking forward to? Most people blinked. Some laughed awkwardly. Some frowned, confused. A few answered automatically. Vacation, retirement, sleep, words that slid away when examined too closely. Marin didn't correct them. She asked the second question. What would you miss if it never happened? That was when the quiet faltered. People shifted. Looked down at their hands. Thought harder than they had in weeks. A woman whispered, My sister's wedding. A man said, surprised, Teaching my son to drive. Someone laughed suddenly, sharply. I was supposed to learn guitar. The air changed, not louder, not brighter. Sharper. Eli watched from a distance as people stood up after those conversations and walked away faster than they'd arrived, brows furrowed, steps purposeful. Is it working? He asked that night. Marin leaned back against a pillar, exhausted in a new way. It's hurting. Iris nodded approvingly. Good. Want always does. The quiet adapted, of course. It always did. By the end of the week, people began answering faster, smoother, curated ones. Safe ones. Distant ones. Wanting without urgency. Marin saw the shift immediately. It's learning to fake longing, she said. Then you go deeper, Iris replied. How? Iris met her gaze. You ask what they'd risk. That night, Marin dreamed, not of houses or doors, but of a city leaning forward, just slightly, like it had remembered gravity. When she woke, her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. Stop reminding people what they've been avoiding. Marin smiled grimly. Because now she knew the truth. The quiet wasn't afraid of pain. It was afraid of people who remembered they wanted something enough to move. The quiet didn't wait. It never did when it felt threatened in the right way. The first report came from a college campus. A student, brilliant, exhausted, weeks away from burning out entirely, walked into an advising office and walked out smiling. She dropped 2 majors. Withdrew from her honors track. Cancelled her internship. I feel lighter, she told her friends. Like I finally admitted what I really wanted. And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like growth. Then she stopped showing up at all. Not failing. Not struggling. Just done. The quiet learned how to complete people. That was the word Marin kept circling. Completion. It wasn't stealing desire anymore. It was resolving it. Every wanting ended neatly. Every risk softened into acceptance. Every future gently folded into a present that didn't ask for more. People began describing it the same way. I realized I don't actually need this. I let go of expectations I never asked for. I'm finally satisfied. Satisfied. The most dangerous word of all. Marin watched it happen in real time. A man she'd spoken to earlier in the week, mid-30s, restless, eyes sharp with unspent ambition, sat on a bench near the river. When she approached him now, he looked sealed. Did you decide about the guitar? She asked carefully. He smiled kindly. I realized I don't need to learn anything new. Her stomach dropped. Why not? Because I'm already enough, he said serenely. The quiet wrapped around his certainty like a bow. Marin stepped back, heart racing. That's not fulfillment, she whispered to herself. That's closure without living. Eli slammed his fist against the crate back at the depot. It's stealing the trajectory. Yes, Marin said hoarsely. It's ending stories early. Iris stood apart from them, arms crossed, expression grim. This is older than houses, she said. This is the promise people make to themselves when they're too tired to keep becoming. Marin pressed her palms to her eyes. The quiet had finally done what hunger and comfort never could. It had offered people exactly what they thought they wanted. No unfinished selves. No aching futures. No reason to reach. A world without longing. The backlash vanished overnight. Why protest when you felt complete? Why argue when nothing felt urgent? Why resist when resistance required wanting something different? The quiet didn't need to silence Marin anymore. It just needed to finish everyone else. Her phone buzzed, one message, looping endlessly as if sent from everywhere and nowhere. You taught them how to want. We taught them how to stop. Marin sank onto the floor, breath shaking. This is it, she whispered. This is the end state. Iris knelt in front of her. Not yet. Marin looked up. How do you fight something that gives people peace? Iris met her gaze, eyes fierce. You remind them peace isn't the same as a life. Marin laughed weakly. They won't listen. They don't have to, Iris said. They just have to feel unfinished again. Silence stretched between them. Then Marin's breath hitched. Because she understood the cost immediately. You're saying I have to break the ending, she whispered. Iris nodded once. For everyone. Eli went pale. That could hurt people. Yes, Marin said softly. It already does. She stood, legs trembling. Because the quiet hadn't won yet. It had only reached its most convincing form. And the only thing more dangerous than hunger, comfort, or fulfillment was a story that ended too cleanly. Marin made the decision before she found the courage. That was how it always happened with the things that mattered most. The body choosing first, the mind scrambling to catch up. I'll do it, she said. The words hung in the depot, heavy and irrevocable. Eli stared at her. You don't even know how. I know where, Marin replied. Iris didn't ask questions. She only nodded once, sharp and precise, like someone who had been waiting years to hear that answer. They went where endings were being manufactured fastest. Not hospitals. Not schools. Places of celebration. A tech expo. A wellness summit. A city-sponsored fulfillment fair, set up in a downtown plaza, banners rippling gently in the breeze. You are enough. Rest is the goal. Arrive at yourself. Marin stood at the edge of the crowd, heart hammering. People moved slowly between booths, faces soft, eyes calm. Volunteers handed out pamphlets printed on thick, soothing paper. Music played at a tempo just slow enough to quiet the pulse. This was where the quiet was strongest. Because everyone here believed the story was over. Marin stepped onto a low concrete wall and raised her voice. Excuse me, she called. No one turned. The quiet muffled urgency now. Words slid off people like water. She swallowed and did the thing she'd been avoiding since the beginning. She opened herself, not to resistance, not to pain, not to want. To loss. She thought of everything unfinished in her own life. Every sentence cut short. Every apology never spoken. Every version of herself she had abandoned because it hurt to keep going. The ache tore through her. She let it. The air shivered. People paused mid-step. A woman blinked hard, pressing a hand to her chest. A man frowned, confused, like he'd forgotten something important. Marin spoke again, voice raw now, carrying. You're not done, she said. You just stopped. That time, heads turned. A ripple moved through the crowd, not panic, not fear. Discomfort. Sharp. Specific. A man shouted angrily. Stop it! A woman burst into tears without knowing why. The banners fluttered violently, snapping in the wind. Marin's knees buckled as the quiet fought back, not pulling, not soothing. Accusing. "You're hurting them." "Yes," Marin whispered. "Because you healed them by erasing what still mattered." The quiet surged, trying to seal the cracks she was opening. She pushed harder. She named futures. "Your book isn't written. Your child isn't grown yet. You haven't said goodbye." Each word landed like a fracture. People screamed now, not in terror, but in grief. Police moved in. Sirens wailed. Someone grabbed Marin's arm. She didn't resist. Because the damage was done. The future had been reopened. And everyone could feel how much it hurt to want again. That night, the headlines exploded. Activist causes mass emotional distress at public event. City officials condemn anti-fulfillment attack. Marin watched the footage from a holding room, wrists cuffed, face pale but steady. She saw herself on screen, small, shaking, shouting into a world that wanted her quiet. Eli's face appeared briefly in the crowd, eyes wide with horror and awe. Iris was nowhere to be seen. Good. Marin closed her eyes. Because she knew this was only the beginning. She had made the world unfinished again. And unfinished things don't stay quiet. The quiet didn't shatter all at once. It cracked. Hairline fractures ran through it, invisible at first, but spreading fast. Like ice under pressure, like a dam that had been pretending not to strain. The world didn't erupt into chaos. It hesitated. People woke up angry. That was new. News anchors snapped at producers. Comment sections turned vicious, then incoherent. Old resentments resurfaced without the gentle fog to blunt them. Fulfillment curdled into frustration. Marin felt it from the holding room, a low vibration in her bones, not warmth, not pressure, but something awake. Something that had been held under the quiet like a hand pressed over a mouth for far too long. The quiet hadn't erased conflict. It had contained it. And now the container was broken. The riots didn't start where the quiet had been weakest. They started where it had been strongest. At a completion center downtown, one of the places where people had been guided gently into ending their ambitions. Protesters gathered first, then counter-protesters. Voices rose. Someone pushed. The quiet tried to settle it. It failed. Anger flared sharp and fast, unsoftened by numbness. Fists flew. Glass shattered. Sirens screamed. Marin watched the footage on a muted television. "That's not me," she whispered. Eli's voice came from behind her. "It's not." He stood in the doorway, pale, eyes rimmed red. Somehow, impossibly, he'd been allowed to see her. "The quiet isn't in control anymore," he said. "But something else is coming up through the cracks." Marin closed her eyes. She felt it now. Not a house. Not a room. Not rest. Rage. Loss turned sharp. Grief without anesthesia. This was what the quiet had been hiding people from. Iris found her that night. Not in the cell. In the dream. She stood amid ruins that looked like a city and a memory at the same time. "This is why the quiet existed," Iris said, voice echoing oddly. "Not to save people. To keep this buried." Marin looked around at the dreamscape. Burned buildings, shouting crowds, people clutching each other in terror and fury. "Then maybe it was right," Marin said softly. Iris shook her head. "No. This was never meant to stay buried. It was meant to be lived through." Marin's throat tightened. "Then what happens now?" Iris's eyes were sad. "Now the quiet is gone, and what was underneath has to learn restraint." Marin woke gasping. The cell was dark. Silent. But the silence was different now. It wasn't watching. It was bracing. By morning, the quiet was no longer everywhere. In some places, it clung desperately, pockets of numbness, people trying to sink back into stillness, begging for the ending to return. In others, it was gone completely. What replaced it was raw. Too raw. Governments called it the rebound. Psychologists warned of emotional whiplash. Marin sat on the cot, head in her hands. I didn't end it, she whispered. I just uncovered something worse. The air stirred faintly. Not in comfort. In agreement. Because the quiet had never been the oldest thing here. It had been a lid. And now, with the lid torn off, the world had to face what it had always contained. The terrible, necessary work of learning how to feel without destroying itself. They came from Marin at dawn. Not guards. Not police. People. A doctor was shaking hands. A city councilwoman who hadn't slept in 3 days. A man from a crisis response unit whose voice kept cracking no matter how carefully he spoke. They sat across from her in a gray room that smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. You started this, the councilwoman said, not accusing, not angry. Just exhausted. Marin nodded. I know. And you can stop it, the doctor said quickly. We've seen the data. The quiet isn't gone, it's destabilized. But it's still there. It responds to you. Marin closed her eyes. She felt it now, faint, fragmented, scattered in pieces across the city like glass after an explosion. The quiet wasn't whole anymore, but it still remembered her. You want me to put it back? Marin said. The man from crisis response leaned forward. Not everywhere. Just enough. People are hurting themselves. Hurting each other. They don't know how to feel this much all at once. Marin swallowed. Because they weren't wrong. Emergency rooms overflowed. Domestic violence spiked. Old grief came roaring back without warning. People who had lived numbly for months now felt everything at full volume, and some of them broke under it. You could give them relief, the doctor said softly. Just enough to stabilize. Marin laughed bitterly. That's how it started. Silence fell. Finally, the councilwoman asked, If you don't, what happens? Marin looked at her hands. They learn, she said. Or they burn everything down trying not to. Eli stood in the corner, silent until now. She's not a switch, he said. She's not a system. Marin met his eyes, grateful. I won't rebuild the quiet, she said firmly. Not as it was. The doctor's shoulders slumped. Then what do we do? Marin took a slow breath. We build capacity, she said. Not numbness. Not completion. Not rest without cost. The councilwoman frowned. In how long? Marin met her gaze. A generation. They stared at her like she'd said a curse. You're asking us to let people suffer, the man said. Marin shook her head. I'm asking you to let them feel, and to give them tools instead of lids. She stood, legs unsteady but resolute. I'll help, she said. I'll teach. I'll intervene when it turns destructive. I'll be the thing the quiet never was. And what's that? The councilwoman asked quietly. Marin didn't answer right away. Because the truth scared her more than anything the quiet had ever offered. She finally said, I'll stay. Not as a door. Not as a house. As a witness. As someone who doesn't disappear when it gets unbearable. The room stayed silent. Somewhere far away, the fragments of the quiet shifted, waiting to see which shape the world would choose next. And Marin understood something at last. Ending the quiet wasn't the hardest thing she'd done. Living without it would be. The world did not heal. Not neatly. Not quickly. Not all at once. It learned. That was slower. Rougher. Full of mistakes. Marin was released quietly. No charges, no apology, no forgiveness. Just a recognition, unspoken but heavy, that locking her away would not unmake what had been uncovered. She became hard to categorize after that. Not a leader. Not a symbol. Not a solution. She traveled instead. Cities. Towns. Schools. Hospitals. Community centers that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. She sat in rooms with people who were overwhelmed, furious, grieving, terrified by how much they felt now. She did not offer rest. She offered language. This hurts because it matters. You're unfinished because you're alive. You don't need to be okay yet. Some people walked out. Some shouted at her. Some cried so hard they had to leave the room. And some, quietly, stubbornly, stayed. The fragments of the quiet never fully vanished. They couldn't. In moments of mass trauma, fires, storms, tragedies, the old stillness crept back, trying to soften the blow. This time, it didn't take over. It hovered. And people noticed. They learned to say, "I don't want that yet." They learned to lean on each other instead of sinking inward. They learned that numbness was not the same as peace. The quiet became what it should have been all along. Temporary. Voluntary. Limited. Eli stayed with Marin as long as he could. Eventually, he left, to build a life that pulled him forward instead of anchoring him to vigilance. On the day he said goodbye, he hugged her hard and said, "You didn't save the world." Marin smiled tiredly. "Good. You made it possible to stay in it," he corrected. Years later, Marin returned to Morrow Road. The house still stood. Gray paint weathered now. Porch sagging just a little more. Windows reflecting trees and sky and nothing else. She stood at the gate for a long time. The house did not call her name. It did not creak in recognition. It did not open. It simply stood, a place where something had once learned the wrong lesson, then been taught, slowly and painfully, how to let go. Marin felt no warmth in her chest. No pressure. Only memory. "That's good," she whispered. She turned and walked away. The world continued. Messy. Loud. Aching. Incomplete. People wanted things again, sometimes foolish things, sometimes impossible ones. They failed. They tried again. They left rooms even when it hurt to do so. No one built houses that learned names anymore. And when they did begin to, someone noticed. Someone spoke up. Someone remembered that rest is meant to be passed through, not lived inside. If you walk long enough, you may still find places that feel quiet in the old way. A bench where time slows. A room where your shoulders drop. A moment where the world seems to pause and offer you an ending. You can sit. You can breathe. But if you listen closely, you'll feel it. The unfinished pull forward. The small, stubborn ache of wanting something more. That ache is not a flaw. It is the sound of a door that still opens both ways. And this time, you get to decide when to walk through.